See, Gideon Strake didn't even look up from his ledger when his man dragged Elias Calder through the door. See, he just kept writing, slow and deliberate, while Elias bled onto the floorboards. See, then Strake set his pen down, walked around the desk, and crouched so his face was level with the kneeling man's. See, he spoke quietly the way a man speaks when he knows nobody's coming to stop him. See, tell me where it is, Strake said, or I'll make sure your little girl never finds out what happened to you. See, Elias didn't answer, so Strake stood up, straightened his coat, and nodded to the man holding the door. See, that was the last night anyone in Red Hollow saw Elias Calder alive. See, now if that had been your child's father, if that had been your family's land, see, what would you have done? If this is your first time here, welcome. See, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because this channel tells us that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. See, drop your city and country in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. See, and if it moves you, give it a like. It costs nothing and it means everything. See now, let's go back to where it really started. The town of Red Hollow didn't have much to recommend it in the autumn of 1883, but it had one thing that most Colorado settlements lacked. It had learned to mind its own business. See, not out of politeness, out of fear. The kind of fear that settles into a place so slowly that the people living inside it stop noticing the weight. See, they just walk a little shorter, talk a little quieter, and find reasons to look the other way when something uncomfortable appears at the edge of their vision. See, Rhett Calloway was the most uncomfortable thing Red Hollow had seen in months. See, he came in on foot, which was the first wrong thing about him. See, a man without a horse in Colorado territory wasn't a man in transit, he was a man who had lost everything worth keeping. See, his boots were cracked at the left heel, his coat had a tear along the shoulder seam that he hadn't bothered to repair, and he moved with the careful, deliberate gait of someone managing pain he had decided to stop complaining about. See, he was 34 years old, and he looked 50. See, he stopped in front of an empty storefront on the main street, studied the overhang for a moment like he was doing arithmetic in his head, and then lowered himself to the ground and sat with his back against the boards. See, he didn't ask anyone for water. He didn't look for the saloon. See, he just sat there in the late afternoon light and breathed, and after a while he tilted his head back and closed his eyes. See, the people of Red Hollow walked past him. A woman with a market basket crossed the street 30 feet before she reached him, for no reason she could have explained. See, two men outside the dry goods store watched him settle and then turned back to their conversation, deliberately, like a door being pulled shut. See, a boy of about 12 stopped and stared until his mother took him by the collar and moved him along without a word. See, nobody in Red Hollow helped strangers anymore. See, helping strangers had a way of getting people noticed, and getting noticed had a way of getting people visited by Gideon Strake's hired men, and nobody in this town wanted that particular knock on their door. See, Rhett wasn't thinking about any of this. He was thinking about his horse. See, the horse's name was Bishop, a black quarter horse Rhett had raised from a colt 11 years ago, trained himself, and ridden across more of this country than he could name. See, Bishop had been taken from him 3 days back at a crossroads 20 miles east of Red Hollow. See, taken by 4 men who came out of the tree line without warning and who hadn't asked for anything before they hit him with a rifle stock across the back of his skull. See, when he woke up in the ditch, see, the men were gone. See, his saddlebag was gone. See, and Bishop was gone. See, he had walked for 3 days. He didn't know yet that the men who took his horse had brought it to Gideon Strake. See, he didn't know yet that the order to take the horse had come from Strake directly, or that Strake had recognized the horse from a description he had received nearly 5 years earlier, or that the man who had given Strake that description was dead. See, he didn't know any of that. He just sat against the boards and breathed and thought about his horse, because thinking about Bishop was easier than thinking about everything else. See, he was almost asleep when he heard footsteps stop in front of him. See, he opened his eyes. The girl was 8, maybe 9 small for her age, with dark hair pulled into 2 braids that someone had done in a hurry, one higher than the other. She wore a dress that had been let out at the hem twice and would need letting out again soon. Her boots were good quality but too large, stuffed with something at the toe to make them fit. She stood in front of Rhett with her arms slightly away from her body. The way children stand when they are working up to something they know is risky. In her right hand she was holding half a biscuit. She held it out toward him. Rhett stared at it. He was hungry enough that his hands moved before his pride could stop them. He took the biscuit and ate it in 2 bites, and the whole time she watched him with dark, serious eyes that didn't match her age. Thank you, he said. You're welcome. She didn't move. Are you Rhett Calloway? He stopped chewing. Who's asking? Maisie Calder. She said it like it was supposed to mean something to him. When his expression didn't change, a small crease appeared between her brows. My father said if you ever came to Red Hollow, I had to find you before anyone else did. He said not to trust anyone else first. Your father, Rhett said slowly. What's your father's name? Elias Calder. She watched his face carefully. You don't know him. No, but he knew you. She said it like this was a simple fact, the same way she might say the sky was blue or the creek ran east. He said you were the best horseman he ever saw. He said if something happened to him, a man like you would know what to do. Rhett sat very still. Something happened to him. He looked at this child with her mismatched braids and her 2 large boots, standing in the middle of a street where every adult had walked past him without a second glance. And he understood from the way she said those 4 words that she already knew what they meant. She wasn't hoping her father was delayed. She wasn't holding on to the idea that he had ridden to the next county for supplies. She was 8 years old, and she had already done the arithmetic. How long has he been gone? Rhett asked. 11 weeks and 4 days. He should have said he was sorry. He should have said he wasn't the man her father thought he was, because whoever Elias Calder had known or heard stories about, that man was gone now. He should have said he was nobody. He had nothing, and she needed to find someone with more left in them than he had. He didn't say any of that. He said, "Where are you staying?" That was the moment it changed. He didn't know it yet, but that was the moment. Maisie glanced quickly down the street, the first nervous gesture she had made. Her eyes moved in a way that told him she had been watching her surroundings, her whole life, not the way children watch things out of curiosity, but the way people watch things when they have learned that not watching gets you hurt. Not here, she said. Come with me. She turned and walked without looking back to see if he followed. Rhett pushed himself to his feet. His knees protested. His back protested louder. He stood on the sidewalk boards for a moment, watching this child walk away from him down the side street, her braids slightly uneven, her 2 large boots making small sounds on the packed dirt. He followed. What he did not see, what he had no reason to look for yet, was the man standing in the shadow of the feed store across the street. The man had not been there a moment ago. He had appeared the way Strake's men had a habit of appearing in Red Hollow, quietly, from somewhere unexpected, already watching. He watched Rhett get to his feet. He watched Maisie walk. He watched them disappear around the corner of the building. Then he turned and walked in the opposite direction, quickly, toward the big house on the hill at the north end of town. Maisie led him through the back end of Red Hollow along a route that avoided the main street entirely through a narrow passage between 2 buildings. Across a lot where a structure had burned down and the foundation stones were still black through a gap in a fence. She moved through these spaces with the confidence of a child who had mapped every exit. She didn't explain where they were going. She didn't talk at all. The abandoned freight shed was at the far southeast edge of town, half hidden by a stand of cottonwood trees that had grown up along a dry creek bed. From the street it looked collapsed. One wall had given way inward, and the roof sagged at that corner, but the rest of the structure was intact, and Maisie went straight to a low side door that had been covered with old lumber from the outside. Carefully, so that it looked impassable from 10 feet away. She moved 2 boards and squeezed through the gap and looked back at him. Rhett was considerably larger than Maisie Calder. He turned sideways and made it through with about 2 inches to spare. Inside, the shed smelled like old canvas and dry wood and something else, something homey underneath the dust, a hint of cooked food, a trace of soap. His eyes adjusted. Along the left wall, between 2 stacks of freight crates, someone had arranged a sleeping space, a blanket roll, a small pillow made from a flour sack stuffed with what looked like dried grass, a tin cup and a dented plate on top of a crate that served as a table, a candle stub in a holder, a folded garment that was probably a nightgown. On the crate beside the plate was a stack of letters. Maisie crossed the shed and sat on her blanket roll and folded her hands in her lap, watching him look around. He noticed she was tracking his reaction. She wanted to know if he was the kind of man who would minimize what she had done here, or dismiss it, or tell her what she should be doing instead. He understood this because he had spent enough time around frightened people to recognize the particular quality of attention they paid to others' faces. You've been living here, he said. Not a question. Since the 3rd week after Papa disappeared, she didn't offer it apologetically. It was information. The house wasn't safe anymore. Mr. Strake's men came twice. What were they looking for? She looked at him steadily. What Papa had. And what did your Papa have? She reached under the flour sack pillow and pulled out the stack of letters. She held them out to him. He crossed the shed and took them. He pulled the nearest one from its envelope. The paper was good quality, the handwriting careful and precise, the kind of hand that belonged to a man who had taught himself to write and took pride in doing it correctly. He read the first paragraph, then the second, and then he stood very still and read the whole letter through. He read 2 more. By the 3rd letter, he understood what Elias Calder had been trying to build. What he had been collecting. Names, dates, deeds, property transactions that looked legitimate if you glanced at them, but fell apart when you laid them side by side. Transfers signed by owners who, according to records in 2 separate counties, were deceased at the time of signing. Payments to officials whose salaries did not account for the property they had purchased the following year. A pattern, painstaking and dense, assembled by a man who had clearly understood that the thing he was building would only be useful if it was airtight, because the man he was building it against had enough money to destroy anything that wasn't. Gideon Strake. Rhett folded the letter and looked at Maisie. She was watching him with those dark, steady eyes. Your father gathered all this himself? He was a surveyor. He traveled between properties for his work. He saw things. She paused. He told me he was almost done. That when he was done, he was going to take it to the territorial office in Denver. When did he say that? 3 days before he disappeared. Rhett set the letters down on the crate beside her plate. He was quiet for a moment, working through it. Strake would have known Elias was getting close. Would have had people watching him the way his people were watching everything in this town. And Elias, for all his careful work, had either not known he was being watched, or had known and run out of time. These letters, Rhett said. Are there more? Somewhere else? I think so. Maisie picked up the edge of her blanket and turned it in her fingers, the first thing he had seen her do that looked like nervousness. Papa talked about a ledger. He said that was the most important thing. I don't know where it is. I looked in the house before I left, but I didn't find it. Rhett thought about that. He thought about the house. Where is your family's land? 2 miles west of town. The Calder homestead. She looked up at him. It's inside, what, mister? Strake calls his territory now. There it was. He stood in the freight shed with the letters in front of him, and a girl watching him, and a very clear understanding of what he would be walking into if he went anywhere near the Calder homestead. Strake's territory, armed men, a man who had already made at least one person disappear for knowing too much. Rhett had no horse. He had no money. He had no standing in this town and no allies he could name. See, he was 34 years old, and he had spent the last 2 years of his life dismantling everything he had once built, piece by piece, with the thorough, self-destructive efficiency of a man who had decided he deserved exactly what he got. See, he should have said no. Any sensible reading of the situation pointed to no. See, he opened his mouth, and that was the moment he didn't say no, that the side door of the freight shed was hit hard from outside, boards clattering, something heavy thrown against it. See, Maisie was on her feet before the second impact, faster than should have been possible for a child her size, blanket thrown back, the tin cup swept off the crate with a clatter. See, back door, she said. She wasn't whispering. She had been ready for this. See, there's a back door? I made one. She was already moving. See, the side door took a third impact, and this time wood cracked. See, Rhett was moving too toward Maisie, toward wherever she was going, because in the last 30 seconds, she had become the most reliable navigator in his world, and he understood that completely. See, the back door was a section of wallboard that she had worked loose at the bottom and propped with a stick. See, she knocked the stick away. The board swung outward, and she slid through on her stomach into the pale early evening. See, Rhett followed, scraping both shoulders, coming up in a crouch behind the shed in the shadow of the cottonwood trees. See, from inside the shed came the sound of the side door giving way. See, voices low, professional, the kind of voices that belonged to men doing a job rather than men who had lost their tempers. See, Maisie was already 3 feet away, moving into the cottonwoods, her 2 large boots remarkably quiet on the dry leaves. See, she stopped and looked back at him. "Do you believe me now?" she asked. See, "I believed you before," Rhett said. Something crossed her face then, something complicated and quick, and she looked away before he could name it. See, she had the expression of a person who had not been believed in a very long time and was not yet sure what to do with the alternative. "See, west," she said, "past the Miller grain lot and through the back of the Hendrick pasture. See, I know a way. The homestead. The ledger will be there." See, Papa was smart about hiding things. He would have put it where he could get to it, but where they couldn't find it without knowing to look. See, Rhett straightened up. The voices in the freight shed had gone quiet, which was worse than when they were loud. See, "All right," he said. "Show me." She turned and moved into the dark between the trees, and Rhett Calloway, broken, horseless, see, with half a biscuit still sitting in his empty stomach and not a dollar to his name, followed an 8-year-old girl into the Colorado night toward the most dangerous piece of land in Red Hollow. See, he wasn't thinking about Bishop anymore. He was thinking about a man named Elias Calder, who had been careful and thorough and almost done, and about what it cost a man to be almost done. See, and somewhere in the back of his chest, underneath the exhaustion and the old damage, and everything he had spent 2 years trying to get rid of, something had begun to move that hadn't moved in a very long time. See, not hope. It was too soon for hope, but something close to it. See, something that felt like the first motion of a thing that had been still far too long. See, he followed the girl into the dark. The night had teeth. See, that was the only way Rhett could describe it later. On the rare occasions when he described it at all, the way the cold came off the Colorado dark, like something alive and hostile. See, the way the wind through the cottonwoods made sounds that your mind kept trying to turn into footsteps. See, he had been in cold nights before. He had slept outside in worse. See, but there was something particular about moving through unfamiliar ground in the dark, with a child beside you and men with guns somewhere behind you that made the temperature feel personal. See, Maisie moved well. That was the thing he kept noticing. See, she moved through the dark the way people move when they have spent considerable time doing it alone, not reckless, not slow, but with a kind of quiet economy that didn't waste anything. See, she watched the ground without watching it, the way experienced walkers do, feeling the terrain through their feet. See, she changed direction twice without explaining why, and both times Rhett caught what she had caught half a second later the first time. See, lantern light moving behind a fence line in a direction that suggested someone working a patrol rather than walking somewhere with a purpose. See. The second time, the sound of a horse standing still, which is a specific sound once you know it, nothing like a horse moving, and a standing horse in the dark without a rider nearby, meant a rider who was somewhere on foot. See. They went around both. Rhett said nothing. There was nothing useful he could add to her navigation, and he understood that clearly enough. See, what he contributed was size, and the ability to carry her if she got hurt, and the fact that he had been in enough bad situations to stay quiet when quiet was what the situation required. See, beyond that, she was the one who knew this ground, knew these routes, knew where the gaps in fences were, and which dogs would bark and which ones wouldn't. See, it took 40 minutes to clear the edge of town. See, when the last fence line was behind them and the land opened up into the kind of dark that comes from distance rather than obstruction, Maisie slowed her pace and walked beside him instead of half a step ahead. See, how far? Rhett asked. Another mile, maybe a little more. See, the creek bends east just before the property line. She paused. See, there's a mandrake sometimes posts at the main gate. See, but Papa always came in from the south field. There's a way through the fence that isn't obvious. See, you've done this before. Come back after you left. See, she didn't answer for a moment. Then twice. I needed things. See, what things? Food, first time. Second time I was looking for the ledger. A pause. See, I didn't find it. But I also didn't look everywhere. See, I got scared and left. He wasn't going to tell her she shouldn't have gone alone. See, it wouldn't help anything. And besides, she had already made the judgment herself she had gone, gotten scared, and left. See, she wasn't asking for his opinion on her choices. She was giving him information. See, what scared you? Someone had been in the house after me. See, things were moved. Not searched, moved. Like someone wanted me to know they'd been there. See, that landed in Rhett's chest with a weight he didn't show on his face. See, someone had been there and left signs on purpose. That was a particular kind of intimidation, the kind designed not to stop you immediately, but to work on you slowly, to keep you off balance, to make every subsequent step feel like it was watched. See, it was a technique. It meant the people using it were patient, which made them considerably more dangerous than people who simply grabbed and broke things. See, tell me about your father, Rhett said. Not because it would help with what was immediately in front of them, but because he needed to understand the shape of the man he was following into enemy territory, even if that man was gone. See, Maisie was quiet for long enough that he thought she might not answer. See, he was stubborn, she said finally. The most stubborn person I ever knew. See, my mama used to say it was his best quality and his worst one at the same time. She stopped, and he could hear in the brief silence that she had just run into the fact of her mother. See, Mama died when I was 5 fever. After that, it was just the two of us. See, I'm sorry. Papa used to say she would have known what to do with him better than he knew what to do with himself. She almost smiled. He could hear it in her voice, even in the dark. See, he was good at the work, the surveying, the maps, the numbers. See, not as good at the people parts. He didn't know how to. He didn't always see when people were lying to him. See, he believed what they said, and then he checked it against the numbers, and the numbers always told the truth. But sometimes, by the time the numbers told him, it was too late. See, Rhett thought about that. A man who trusted evidence over instinct. See, it was a dangerous quality in a place like Red Hollow, where the evidence had been carefully arranged by someone who could afford to arrange it any way he liked. See, when did he start putting it together? The information on Strake? See, 2 years ago, maybe 2.5. He was hired to survey a property transfer west of town, and something didn't match. See, he told me about it at supper. He was excited. You know how some people get excited about a puzzle? She glanced at him. See, he was like that. He saw the problem, and he couldn't let it go. See, he started pulling at the thread, and every time he pulled, another thread came with it. See, did he tell anyone else? Anyone in town? He tried. Her voice went flat in a way that suggested the memory was neither distant nor comfortable. See, he went to the land office first. The man there told him the paperwork was in order and showed him out. See, he went to the sheriff. She stopped. What happened? See, the sheriff told Strake. Papa found out 2 days later because Strake's man came to the house and told him very politely that it might be better for everyone if he focused on his surveys and left the interpretation of legal. See, documents to people who were trained in the law, a beat. See, he wasn't frightened by that. He should have been. See, he was angry. Rhett nodded slowly in the dark. He was beginning to understand Elias Calder. See, a man who saw a problem and couldn't let go. A man who heard a polite threat and got angry instead of careful. See, a man who had been right about everything and had still run out of time because being right about the evidence doesn't protect you from the people the evidence is built against. See, he wondered if Elias had known at the end how close he was. See, if he had known his daughter was going to carry what he left behind. See, he didn't ask Maisie that. Some questions you hold for yourself. See, they reached the creek at the point where it bent east, and Maisie turned south along the bank without hesitating. See, the ground here was softer and Rhett watched his step. See, the water was low late season and moved without much sound. See, 20 yards south of the bend, a section of the fence that ran along the Calder property had 3 posts, leaning at angles that made it look damaged, but that, on closer inspection, see, had been loosened deliberately and carefully and propped so they looked accidental. See, Maisie leaned the center post inward without effort, creating a gap large enough for a person to pass through without catching on the wire. See, Papa did this, she said quietly, a long time ago. See, he said every piece of land needs a door you keep for yourself. See, Rhett stepped through the fence and straightened on the other side. See, he was on Calderland, or what had been Calderland. See, whatever Strake had done to the paperwork, whatever forged signature sat in some file in the land office. In town, the ground under his boots had been cleared and worked, and lived on by a family that was not Gideon Strake's. See, and that fact sat in him heavier than he expected. See, the homestead buildings appeared out of the dark gradually, the barn first, large and mostly intact, then the smaller shape of a root cellar, then the house itself. See, a single-story structure with a covered porch that had one post replaced with a different colored wood, newer than the others. See, dark windows, no light anywhere. Maisie stopped at the tree line and studied the buildings for a long moment. See, she said, just above a whisper. See, someone had been in the house. See, I don't know if they left anyone. I'll check the barn first, Rhett said. See, you stay here. Don't come toward the buildings until I come back for you. See, she looked at him. What if you don't come back? It was not a dramatic question. See, she was not performing fear. She was doing risk assessment the way children do when they have learned that risk assessment is necessary, and she was asking a practical question that deserved a practical answer. See, if I don't come back in 15 minutes, Rhett said, you go back through the fence and you go to the first homestead east of the creek, not into town, east, and you tell them what you know, and you let someone else carry it from here. See, you understand? She looked at him for another moment. See, you'll come back, I intend to. That's not the same thing. See, no, he agreed. It's not. He left her at the tree line and crossed the open yard to the barn, moving low and not in a straight line, old habits returning from years he hadn't thought about in a long time. See, the barn door was closed but not latched. He put his hand flat against it and listened, and heard the things he expected, the small sounds of wood settling, the faint movement of air. See, he pushed it open 6 inches and waited. Nothing rushed out or shouted. See, he went in. The barn was empty of people and largely empty of everything else. See, what livestock had been here was long gone. A few tools hung on the wall, a broken harness on a hook, a wooden trough that had dried and begun to split at the seams. See, in the back stall, hay that had been left and not replaced since Maisie fled the property 11 weeks ago. See, but here was the thing that Rhett noticed immediately upon stepping into the back half of the barn, the floor. See, the packed dirt of the main floor continued into the back stall, but in one corner, under the hay, the texture changed. See, He moved the hay with his foot and crouched and pressed his palm to the ground and felt the edge a seam, straight and deliberate, the size of a man's torso. See, something had been cut into the packed earth and covered. See, something was under there that had been put there by someone who wanted to find it again. See, he didn't dig. Not yet. He stood up and went back for Maisie. See, she was exactly where he had left her, which surprised him slightly. See, he had half expected to find she had moved closer despite what he said. See, barn's clear, he said. House? I'll check the windows before we go in. She moved past him. See, I learned to do that. He followed her to the house, and she went along the porch, not stepping up on it, walking the ground beside it, and looked through each window from the side, not straight on. See, the glass was dark, no reflections, no movement. Clear, she said. See, the front door was unlocked. That bothered Rhett more than a lock would have. See, a locked door meant they'd stopped caring about the appearance of welcome. See, an unlocked door in an abandoned house meant someone expected to need access quickly. See, inside, the house smelled like absence, like a place where things had been living and then stopped. See, the kitchen was to the left, the main room ahead, 2 closed doors to the right that would be sleeping rooms. See, everything was in order in the way that things are in order when someone has gone through them and put them back not quite right, not matching the logic of the person who had originally arranged it. See, but functional, unbroken, deliberately left as they found it. See, someone was here again, Maisie said quietly. She was standing in the middle of the main room looking at something Rhett couldn't identify. See, then he saw a chair that had been moved from the table and set facing the front window. See, nobody puts a chair like that for any domestic reason. See, someone had sat there watching the yard. Recently? Rhett asked. See, she crouched and touched the floor beside the chair. See, there's mud. It hasn't dried all the way. She looked up. See, today. Maybe this afternoon. The cold moved through Rhett differently than it had outside. See, this was a different kind of cold. He turned around slowly and thought. See, if someone had been here this afternoon, watching the yard, the chair faced the front they were watching for approach from the road. See, which meant the back of the house, the barn, the south field, the direction he and Maisie had come from, that wasn't where they expected company. See, that was something. Is there a cellar under the house? He asked. See, root cellar is outside. Under the house, there's just the crawl space. See, I need you to think about your father, Rhett said. See, he was looking at the 2 closed doors, not where you think he'd hide something. See, where you know he went when he wanted to be alone. See, when he was working something through in his head. See, where in this house did he go? Maisie turned, and without a word, walked to the door on the right, the one farther from the front of the house. See, she pushed it open. It was a small room, a narrow bed frame stripped of its mattress, a window facing the barn, a writing table with a single drawer. See, this had been Elias Calder's room, and everything in it said something about its owner that the man himself could no longer say. See, the desk faced the window. He had written his letters looking out at his barn, which meant this was where he had worked, where he had thought, where he had been most himself. See, Maisie crossed to the desk and stood in front of it. See, he worked here, she said, every night almost. I used to fall asleep to the sound of his pen. See, Rhett looked at the desk. The drawer was closed. He opened it empty, or appeared to be. See, he pulled it all the way out and felt the underside. See, nothing. See, he looked at the desk itself, the legs. See, the frame. See, the top surface. See, the way the boards met. See, he looked at the window frame. He looked at the floor under the desk. See, nothing. He stood in the room and felt the frustration of a man who has gotten close but not close enough, and then he looked at Maisie, who was looking at the empty bed frame. See, what, he said. He read to me at night, she said. See, she wasn't talking to him exactly. She was talking to the room. See, he'd sit on the edge of the mattress, and I'd be in my bed next door, and he'd leave both doors open and read out loud so I could hear. See, he was reading a book about a surveyor who mapped the Oregon Territory. She paused. See, he always put the book in the same place when he was done. See, she walked to the bed frame and crouched beside the head of it. See, the frame was iron, simple, with a rail along the head that had a decorative lip along its upper edge. See, Maisie ran her fingers along the inside of the rail, feeling, and then her hand stopped. See, she looked up at Rhett. He was beside her in 2 steps. See, tucked inside the hollow of the iron rail, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with a piece of twine, was something flat and rectangular, and approximately the size and weight of a church ledger. See, Maisie pulled it out with both hands. The oilcloth was tied in 3 places. See, she set it on the floor between them, and they both looked at it. See, open it, Rhett said. Her hands were shaking, not from cold. See, she unwrapped the twine from the first tie, the second, the third. See, the oilcloth fell back. The ledger inside was cloth-covered, dark blue, water-stained at the bottom corner, but intact. See, Elias Calder's handwriting on the inside cover, 1 word, 2 dates, and a phrase that made Rhett's stomach tighten. See, the word was a name. The dates were 4 years apart. See, and the phrase was, for whoever finds this after me. See, Rhett took the ledger and opened it. The pages were dense columns of figures and names and dates cross-referenced with margin notes and arrows connecting entries across pages. See, property names on the left, prices paid on the right. See, dates of transfer, names of officials who witnessed. See, and beside each official's name, in a separate column, a second set of figures that did not correspond to any salary a territorial employee had ever publicly received. See, bribes. Every single one of them documented with the specificity of a man who understood that the value of evidence is precision. See, Elias hadn't just gathered what he could reach. He had gone back to the primary sources, the county records, the land office filings, the bank transfer records, see, and built a parallel accounting that could stand against the official one and demonstrate exactly where the official one had been made to lie. See, Rhett turned pages, 12 properties, 1520. See, he stopped at page 31. There was a name in the margin that he had not expected to find. See, written in Elias's careful hand, see, with a small notation beside it, he came before. See, same territory, see, different year. See, also disappeared. The name was Wade Calloway. Rhett sat down on the floor of the room that had belonged to a dead man and held the ledger with both hands and read his brother's name 3 more times to make sure he was not misreading it. See, Wade Calloway, his older brother, the brother who had left 6 years ago and sent 1 letter and then gone silent. See, the brother Rhett had spent 4 of the last 6 years convincing himself had simply decided to stop being part of a family he found inconvenient. See, the brother he had called selfish in his darker moments and tried not to think about in the rest of them. See, Wade had been here. Wade had been doing what Elias had been doing years before Elias in the same territory against the same man. See, and then Wade had disappeared. Maisie was watching him. See, you found something, she said. He turned the ledger so she could see the margin note. See, she read it. She looked up at him. You know that name. See, he's my brother. The silence in that room was the kind that comes after the thing you've been building toward finally shows you what it is. See, your brother was looking into Strake, Maisie said slowly. See, I didn't know that. I didn't know any of this. Rhett closed the ledger. See, he was working to keep his voice level, and he wasn't entirely succeeding. See, I thought he just left. I thought he went somewhere and decided not to come back. See, he was doing what Papa was doing, Maisie said. She said it gently, the way a child sometimes is gentle with an adult when the adult has just received news that the child has had longer to prepare for. See, he was trying to stop Strake, and then he was gone. See, Rhett stood up. He held the ledger and he stood in his dead brother's footprint, because that's what it was. He understood now. See, Wade had stood in this same territory and pressed against the same wall, and the wall had taken him, and he felt something move through him that he could not name precisely. See, it was not grief exactly. Grief implies a kind of softness. See, this was harder than grief. This was the feeling of a wrong that has been sitting quietly for 6 years suddenly becoming visible, and the visibility of it making everything that came before it look different, his own wandering, his own unraveling. See, the years he had spent calling it freedom when it was really just the long drift of a man who had stopped having anything to anchor to. See, Wade had not abandoned him. Wade had been here, and then Wade had been taken. See, he became aware that his hands were very tight on the ledger. See, he loosened them deliberately. "We need to get this out of this house," he said. "See now." "I know," Maisie said. She was already standing. See, she had rewrapped the oilcloth around the letters they had brought and was pushing them into the waist of her dress. See, where do we take it? Rhett thought fast. Not into town, not with the man who had sat in the chair watching the yard, not with Strake's men already having found the freight shed. See, not to the East Homestead, not yet, not until he knew who could be trusted. See, back to the barn, he said. There's something in the floor of the back stall that wasn't put there by accident. See, I need to see what's under it before we move. Something in the floor? See, your father was a careful man, Rhett said. He hid the ledger. See, if he was as careful as I think, he didn't hide only one thing. See, she moved to the door without arguing. He followed her, ledger under his arm, and that was when they both heard it. See, hoofbeats. Not one horse, several. Coming fast up the road from the direction of town and not slowing for the gate. See, Maisie looked at him. The back stall, she said. They ran. See, the yard between the house and the barn was 30 feet of completely open ground, and Rhett covered it fast. See, longer stride than Maisie, but she was already at the barn door by the time he got there because she had gone straight and he had cut wide by instinct, old bad habit from a game he no longer played. See, he got through the barn door half a step behind her and pulled it nearly closed and stood in the dark with the ledger against his chest, listening. See, the horses stopped at the front of the property. He heard voices low, professional, the same quality as the voices in the freight shed. See, then boots on the porch. The front door, Maisie, was already at the back stall. See, she was doing something with her hands at the corner of the floor, feeling for the seam he had found earlier. See, she found it faster than he had. She was pulling at the edge. See, Rhett moved to her and got his fingers in and pulled upward, and the section of packed earth came free. Not earth at all, he realized, but a shaped piece of wood faced with dirt and dry hay, incredibly light, a disguised hatch. See, under it was a hole approximately 18 inches deep and 2 feet square. See, inside the hole was a tin box. See, and inside the tin box, when he opened it in the dark by feel and pulled out the contents, were two things: a sealed envelope, addressed to the Territorial Land Office in Denver in Elias Calder's handwriting, already stamped. See, and a folded document that when he opened it was a hand-drawn map showing property boundaries in the territory, with notations in the same hand as the letters. See, the envelope had never been sent. Elias had died before he could send it. See, above them, inside the house, boots moved across floorboards toward the back of the building. See, Rhett put the map and the sealed envelope inside the oilcloth with the ledger, wrapped it, and looked at Maisie in the near dark. See, she pointed at the back of the barn. See, the way out she'd found the first time she'd come back, which she hadn't told him about until now, which was perfectly consistent with who she was. She kept information until it was useful, the same way her father kept evidence. See, the same careful management of what you reveal and when. See, there was a loose plank in the back wall, one, just wide enough. See, the boots in the house were getting louder, moving room to room, someone calling out low to someone else. They were working a pattern. They had done this before. See, Rhett went through the plank gap first this time, because on the other side there was open ground, and the moon had come out from behind the cloud cover, and if there was anyone on the far side of the barn, he needed to be the one who met them. See, he came out in a crouch in the dark behind the barn. See, nobody on this side. He reached back through the gap, and Maisie put the oilcloth bundle in his hands, and then came through herself, and they pressed flat against the back wall of the barn, in the shadow that the moon made against it. See, from the front of the property, someone shouted, not words a signal. See, an acknowledgement between two positions. They had people at the gate, and people in the house, and probably someone working the perimeter. See, but not apparently on the south side yet. The same side where Maisie had come and gone twice before, the same side with the loose fence posts. See, she looked at him in the dark, and he saw the question in her face, "Do you trust me?" Not in words. See, just the angle of her chin and the steadiness of her eyes. See, he tipped his head south. "Go," she went. He followed. See, behind them a lantern appeared at the barn door. The beam moved across the yard, found the house, moved back toward the barn, and for one terrible second pointed directly at the back wall where they had been standing. See, it held for 3 seconds and then swept away. They were already in the shadow of the trees when it found the place they'd been. See, Rhett didn't slow down, didn't look back. See, he put the bundle of oilcloth under his arm and moved through the trees behind Maisie Calder, through the dark, back toward the fence, back toward the creek, back toward whatever was on the other side of this night. See, he held his dead brother's shadow in his chest alongside the ledger. See, he thought about a man who had been almost done. He thought about what it cost a man to be almost done and then be stopped. See, he was not going to be stopped before he was finished. See, he didn't know yet what finished looked like. He didn't know who he could bring the ledger to, or how to get it to Denver, or whether Strake had the territorial office in Denver salted the same way he'd salted everything in Red Hollow. See, he didn't know if there was anyone left in this county who hadn't been bought or frightened, or both. See, but he had the ledger, he had the envelope, he had the map. See, and he had an 8-year-old girl who had survived 11 weeks alone in a freight shed by being smarter and more careful than everyone who was looking for her, and who had just, without a moment of hesitation, trusted him with every piece of it. See, that was not nothing. In fact, walking through the dark with Maisie Calder 3 steps ahead of him and the evidence of 2 men's courage under his arm, Rhett Calloway thought that might be the most valuable thing anyone had given him in years. See, he kept moving. They crossed the creek at the shallow bend and didn't stop moving until the Calder fence line was far enough behind them that the lantern light from the property had shrunk to something the size of a firefly. See, then Maisie sat down on a flat rock at the water's edge without being asked and put her hands on her knees and breathed. See, Rhett stood beside her and did the same kind of breathing, the deliberate kind that has nothing to do with being winded and everything to do with telling your body that the immediate emergency is over and it can stop preparing to die. See, he had been doing this since he was 19 years old. See, he had learned it from a man who said it was the difference between surviving a bad situation and surviving the hour after a bad situation. See, because the hour after was when your hands started shaking and your judgment went sideways and you made the mistakes that got you killed when the danger had technically passed. See, his hands were not shaking. He noted this without pride. See, it was just information. Maisie's hands were not shaking either, which told him something about her that the last several hours had only partially prepared him for. "See you all right?" he asked. "Yes," she said it immediately, which meant she hadn't checked yet. See, then she sat with it for a moment. "Yes," she said again, differently this time. See, like she was mildly surprised. He sat down on the ground beside the rock. See, not beside her that would have been presumptuous, that kind of comfort, just near enough that she didn't have to raise her voice. See, the bundle of oilcloth was in his lap. He didn't unwrap it again. See, he had already seen what was in it, and his mind was already working the problem of what to do with it, which meant he needed to think without looking at it. See, because looking at it made him think about Wade, and thinking about Wade right now would take him somewhere he couldn't afford to go yet. See, "Tell me about the schoolmistress," he said. Maisie looked at him sideways. "See, Miss Fenwick, you mentioned her before, in your father's letters." He paused, reconstructing. See, one of the letters said he had shown part of what he found to a woman named Fenwick. See, that she had seen deeds she thought were irregular. See, "He told me about that," Maisie said. He trusted her. See, she was one of the only people in Red Hollow he trusted. She pulled her knees to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. See, she's the school teacher. She's been here longer than almost anyone. See, since before Strake started buying things. She's still in town? See, she was 2 months ago, when I still went into town. A pause. See, I haven't been into town properly since before I found the freight shed. See, I've only gone at the edges at night. I haven't spoken to anyone. See, Rhett thought about that. 2 months. 2 months of no real conversation, no adult, no one to tell you whether your plan was sound or your fear was distorting your judgment. See, he thought about what that would do to most adults, and then looked at this child sitting on her rock in the dark, holding her own knees together, and felt something that he was not equipped to name accurately. See, your father trusted Fenwick, he said. You trust your father's judgment? See, I trust his judgment about people more than his judgment about his own safety, she said. See, he was good at reading people. He was bad at knowing when to run. See, all right. Rhett looked at the creek. Then we try Fenwick. See, but not tonight. Tonight we need to be somewhere they're not looking. See, where, he thought. The freight shed was burned, not literally, but compromised. Strake's men had already found it. See, the Calder homestead was actively being searched. The main street of Red Hollow was out. See, every obvious shelter was either watched or known. See, is there anywhere between here and town that's been empty long enough that nobody is paying attention to it? See, Maisie was quiet for a moment. He had noticed that she did this. She didn't answer quickly to seem helpful. She actually thought first. See, it was a quality most adults had trained themselves out of. See, the Miller grain lot, she said. Mr. Miller left in April. See, Strake's men took the main house, but they haven't done anything with the grain lot outbuilding because it flooded twice last spring and the floors rotted. See, nobody's bothered with it. She paused. It smells terrible. See, that's fine. It really does smell terrible, like something went wrong with the grain, and then something died on top of that. See, Maisie, it's fine. She looked at him. You've slept in worse. See, I've slept in considerably worse. She unfolded herself from the rock. See, it's half a mile north. They walked. The moon was higher now, and the ground was easier to read, which was a mixed benefit, easier to move, easier to be seen. See, Rhett stayed to the low ground where he could, and Maisie didn't argue the longer route. See, she understood the trade-off without being told, which continued to unsettle him in a way he was beginning to accept was just going to be a permanent feature of her company. See, the Miller outbuilding was exactly as advertised. The smell hit Rhett 15 feet from the door, the dense, particular wrongness of grain gone bad layered under something animal and organic. See, he opened the door and breathed through his mouth and went in and checked the corners and came back. See, clear, he said. I know it's clear, she said. I told you it smells too bad for anyone to stay in it. See, she went in without ceremony and found a section of wall where the boards were intact and sat against it and put her head back. See, he came in and sat on the other side of the space. Not far the building was small and set the oilcloth bundle between his feet. See, within 8 minutes Maisie Calder was asleep, not fitfully. See, not shallowly. She went out the way a person goes out when they have been running on discipline and adrenaline for so long that the moment the immediate demand is removed, the body simply takes what it is owed. See, her head tipped sideways against the wall, and her breathing evened out, and she was gone. See, Rhett sat in the smell in the dark and did not sleep. See, he opened the ledger by feel in the near dark and traced the pages with his fingertips, not reading so much as feeling the shape of what Elias Calder had built. See, the density of it, the years of it. He found the page with Wade's name again and sat with his thumb on it for a long time. See, Wade had been 5 years older than Rhett, the better horseman of the two of them, which was saying something. This was before Rhett built the reputation Elias had apparently heard about. See, back when they were both young and their father was still alive, and the Calloway name meant something in 2 counties. See, Wade had left after their father died, not immediately, but within the year, with a quietness that Rhett had interpreted at the time as indifference. See, Wade packed his gear and said he had business and said he would write, and he wrote once, a letter from a town Rhett couldn't find on any map he had, saying he was working and was well and would be in touch. See, he was never in touch again. Rhett had written 3 letters to addresses he didn't have. See, he had asked after Wade in 8 or 9 towns over the years following. See, he had received nothing, And eventually, he had done what people do when they receive nothing. Long enough, he had constructed an explanation that he could live with. See, which was that Wade had simply wanted a life that didn't include a younger brother and had gone and gotten one. See, it had eaten at him for 6 years. Not constantly, not every day. See, but in the particular way that an unexplained absence eats at you, surfacing when you're tired or alone, or had too much whiskey, arriving with the specific bitterness of having been left by someone you had not expected to leave. See, and now here was a ledger page telling him that Wade had been doing what Elias Calder had later died doing. See, that Wade had been in this territory, pressing against the same empire, years before Elias had arrived at the same wall. See, and then Wade had disappeared. See, Rhett sat in the dark and rearranged 6 years of a story he had been telling himself and felt the thing underneath the rearrangement, the grief that had been disguised as resentment for so long that he had forgotten what it actually was. See, he didn't cry. He wasn't built for that, or had been built out of it, one or the other. See, he just sat with it, the way you sit with a weight once you finally stop pretending it isn't there. See, after a while he closed the ledger and leaned his head back against the wall and thought about the school mistress Clara Fenwick and what she might know, and whether Elias Calder's judgment about people was as good as his daughter believed. See, he was still thinking about that when the gray light of early morning began to show at the gap in the outbuilding's roof. See, Maisie woke up without being woken. See, she opened her eyes, see, looked at the gray light, see, and said, "You didn't sleep." See, "I slept," Rhett said. "You didn't." She sat up and straightened her braids with both hands, businesslike. See, "I can tell, because you're sitting in exactly the same position you were in when I fell asleep." See, he decided not to argue with this. "How do we get to Fenwick without being seen?" he asked. See, "She lives behind the schoolhouse. There's an alley that runs behind the buildings on the east side of Main Street. See, nobody uses it except the Hendrick boy when he's avoiding his mother." She paused. See, the schoolhouse isn't on Main Street. It's on the cross street, 3 blocks east. See, she'll be there by 7. How do you know she'll be there by 7? See, because she was always there by 7. She told Papa once that she came early to prepare because the school board wouldn't pay her for preparation time, so she did it before the board's hours officially started. A beat. See, she was angry about it. Papa said it was one of the things that made him trust her. See, someone angry at the people running things, Rhett said. See, he said people who had given up being angry were people who had made their peace with how things were. See, Miss Fenwick hadn't made her peace. Rhett thought about that. See, it was sound reasoning. It was the kind of reasoning that came from a man who had spent a long time thinking about who could be trusted and why. See, which was the kind of thinking that generally came too late to do you any good, but occasionally passed itself along to the right person at the right time. See, he stood up, picked up the oilcloth bundle, and tucked it inside his coat against his ribs. See, it made him look lopsided, but it was secure. "We go now?" he asked. "See now," she said. "Before town wakes up." They went out into the early morning, which was cold and flat and gray in the way that Colorado mornings are before the sun clears the eastern ridgeline. See, the town of Red Hollow was quiet in the way of a place that gets quiet at night, not from peace, but from fear. The kind of quiet where you don't hear people moving or talking, you just hear the absence of it, which is its own distinct sound. See, the alley behind the east side buildings was narrow and smelled like kitchen waste and horse and the particular acrid note of a chimney being lit for the first morning fire. See, Rhett moved through it with his shoulders turned sideways in 2 places where the buildings pinched close. See, Maisie went straight through without adjustment. The schoolhouse was a single-room building with a covered entry porch and 2 windows on each long wall. See, the attached housing behind it was small, a structure tacked onto the original building's back wall, barely more than 2 rooms. See, a light was visible at the rear window. Maisie went to the back door of the housing and knocked. See, not loud. 3 knocks, a pause, 2 more, a pattern. See, the door opened after 15 seconds. Clara Fenwick was somewhere in her 40s, with a face that had been decided on long ago and was not taking suggestions. See, Her hair was dark going gray and pulled back practically, and her eyes were the color of creek water over flat stone, neither warm nor cold, just sharply clear. See, she looked at Maisie first, and something moved across her face, quickly, something between relief and fear, before she locked it down. See, then she looked at Rhett. The lock stayed. Inside, she said. See, not a welcome. An instruction. She stepped back, and they went in. See, the room was small and ordered with the specific neatness of someone who lives in an assigned space and has decided to make it entirely their own within whatever limits they've been given. See, books on every surface that could hold them, a small table with 2 chairs. See, a wash basin, a narrow bed with a worn quilt, on the table an open grade book and a cup of something hot. See, she closed the door and turned to face them. Maisie, she said. See, you're all right. Yes, ma'am, you've been at the freight shed. See, Maisie looked at her. How did you know? Because I checked, Clara Fenwick said simply. See, twice. From a distance. I saw smoke from your candle once, but I didn't come in because I didn't know who else was watching. She looked at Rhett. See, who are you? Rhett Calloway. She was still for a moment. See, then Elias mentioned that name, so I've been told. See, he said if a man named Calloway ever showed up, it either meant something had gone very wrong or something was about to go very right. She looked at him steadily. See, which is it? Both, probably, Rhett said. She looked at the coat where the oilcloth bundle made him lopsided. See, you found it. We found it, Maisie said. Clara Fenwick closed her eyes for 1 second. See, just one. Then she opened them and turned to her wash basin and stood with her back to them for a moment that Rhett understood was not about the wash basin. See, how many of them are out there, she asked. Her voice was even. See, 6 at the homestead last night. At least 2 more in town earlier. Rhett paused. See, they found the freight shed. They came looking. I know they found the freight shed. See, I saw Strake's man outside it yesterday afternoon. She turned around. See, they've been watching for Maisie for 2 months. I don't know how she avoided them this long. See, she knows this town better than they do, Rhett said. See, Clara looked at Maisie. Something shifted in her expression, the particular look of an adult who has just been reminded that a child is more capable than the adult had managed to fully credit. See, yes, she said, she does. Tell me about the deeds, Rhett said. See, Elias said you'd kept copies. She went to the bookshelf on the far wall and took down a volume that turned out not to be a book at all, but a box fashioned to look like one. See, she opened it on the table. See, inside, folded carefully, were documents, not originals, but copies, hand-copied in Clara Fenwick's own careful schoolteacher's hand, each one dated in the margin with a note explaining where she had seen the original and under what circumstances. See, I started doing this 14 months ago, she said. See, after Elias came to me and showed me what he'd found. See, I realized that if something happened to him, the originals would vanish. See, Strake controls the land office. He controls the bank. See, he doesn't control the school, and nobody thinks a school teacher is worth watching closely. A brief pause. See, I relied on that assumption. Rhett looked through the copies. See, they were good detailed, cross-referenced, with her margin notes adding context that matched the ledger entries. See, these were not a substitute for the ledger, but they were corroboration. See, 2 independent sources pointing at the same facts. See, we need to get this to Denver, he said. The Territorial Land Office. See, Elias had an envelope ready. I know about the envelope, Clara said. See, he told me. I don't know if it's still there, Maisie said. See, we found it. Clara looked at her again. You went to the homestead. See, yes, ma'am, Maisie. I know, Maisie said. But it was there. See, and now we have it. Clara pressed her mouth together and said nothing further on the subject, which Rhett appreciated. See, she turned to him. Denver is 4 days by horse. You don't have a horse, she said it without cruelty. See, just facts. And the only people in this town with horses who aren't connected to Strake are people who are frightened enough that they'd need convincing. See, what about the stage? Next stage through Red Hollow goes east, not to Denver. See, the stage to Denver passes through Millhaven, which is 15 miles north of here. She paused. See, Strake has people in Millhaven. He has people everywhere, Rhett said. See, yes, that's accurate. Rhett sat down in one of the two chairs without being invited. See, he put the oilcloth bundle on the table and looked at it. See, Clara sat down in the other chair. Maisie stood between them, which seemed to be her natural position. See, who in this town still has land that Strake hasn't taken? Rhett asked. See, several families in the South Quarter, the Hendricks. See, the Beaumont family, old Virgil Tate. Clara paused. See, they've held on because Strake doesn't need their land yet. See, he works outward from the best grazing territory. The South Quarter is scrub. See, but they know what he's been doing. They know. Knowing and doing something about it are two different things when the man you'd be doing something about employs half the county and owns the other half. She looked at him. See, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that getting the ledger to Denver is the right goal, but it might not be the immediate one, Rhett said. See, Strake knows we have something. He found the homestead last night, which means someone told him where we'd gone. Someone saw us leave town, or his man at the feed store tracked where we went. See, his man at the feed store, Clara said. You saw him. See, I didn't see him. Maisie warned me. He glanced at her. See, she said someone was watching. I saw his boots, Maisie said. See, under the fence boards. He was standing still, which meant he wasn't going anywhere, which meant he was watching. See, Clara looked at the girl for a long moment. Then she looked at Rhett. See, Strake is going to move fast now. He knows she has something, or she wouldn't have been at the homestead. See, he knows you're with her and he doesn't know who you are, which will worry him more than if he did know. See, unknown quantity, Rhett said. Exactly. She stood and went to the window and looked out at the cross street without touching the curtain. See, he'll seal the roads. He may have already. He did it 2 years ago when a family named Prescott tried to leave with documents they'd found about their own property transfer. See, he put men at both ends of the only road out, and the Prescotts turned back. A pause. See, they lost their ranch 6 weeks later. The room was quiet for a moment. See, then we don't use the road, Rhett said. You'd need horses even for the cross-country route to Millhaven. See, the terrain north of here is rough. She turned from the window. See, I have one horse. She's old and she's slow, and she'll carry one person comfortably and two with complaint. See, I don't need to go to Millhaven, Maisie said. Both adults looked at her. See, I don't need to be on the horse, she said carefully. See, the ledger needs to get to Denver. Mr. Rhett can ride to Millhaven and get on the stage. See, I can stay here with Miss Fenwick. Rhett looked at Clara. See, she'd be safer here than on the road, Clara said. See, if Strake's men are watching the routes, a man riding alone is less conspicuous than a man with a child. See, and if they come here, Rhett said. They've come before, Clara said levelly. See, not directly. Obliquely, questions, suggestions. I've managed it. She paused. See, I'm a school teacher. Nobody takes me seriously enough to be afraid of me, which has been an advantage. See, they know Elias trusted you. They suspect it. They haven't been able to prove I have anything. She looked at the box of document copies. See, they won't find these. I've kept them here for 14 months. See, Rhett thought it through. The logic was sound, and he disliked it. See, leaving Maisie behind went against the part of him that had been calibrated toward her safety since the moment she had held out that half biscuit on the main street. See, but the logic was sound. He was the one who needed to move. See, she was the one who needed to stay hidden. Maisie, he said. See, she looked at him with her dark, steady eyes. You trust Miss Fenwick? See, yes. Then I need you to stay with her while I ride to Millhaven and get this on a stage to Denver. He paused. See, I know, she said. You don't know. See, you said so yourself last night. I know now, she said. See, last night I didn't know you. She said it simply, without drama. See, now I do. He didn't know what to do with that. He looked at Clara instead. See, I'll need to leave before the town is fully awake, he said. See, take the horse from the back of the property. There's a gate on the alley side. See, I'll write you a letter of authorization in case anyone stops you. She's registered in my name. Clara went to the table and picked up her grade book, opened it to the back page, and tore it out. See, she wrote quickly. She signed it. It won't stop Strake's men, but it'll give you credibility with anyone else. See, what's the horse's name? Clara paused. Matilda. See, Rhett accepted this without comment. He took the letter. See, he tucked it in his coat alongside the oilcloth. He looked at Maisie one more time. See, she was watching him with the expression she had been wearing in some variation since the moment she had handed him half a biscuit on a Main Street boardwalk, composed, steady, see, working out the math of the situation in real time and not showing the parts of it that were hard. See, she had been doing this alone for 11 weeks. She had done it without practice. See, she had learned it because it was necessary, and she had not had the option of not learning it. See, he had intended to say something useful, something practical about staying hidden and not going near the main street and doing what Clara said. See, instead what he said was, your father built something that was worth dying for. He said it quietly, just to her. See, that's not something most people manage. Maisie looked at him for a moment. See, her chin moved slightly. Just once, I know, she said. See, I just wanted him to stay alive long enough to see it work. See, Rhett didn't have an answer for that. There wasn't one. See, he went out the back door into the alley and found the old gate on the north side and opened it into the small yard behind the schoolhouse. See, Matilda was a gray mare of considerable age and a certain philosophical calm that suggested she had been through enough in her life that a strange man taking her saddle off the fence post and putting it on her back at. See, Dawn was not going to provoke any particular reaction. See, she stood for the saddling with the patience of the deeply experienced. See, Rhett led her out through the gate and mounted up and pointed her north. See, he had the ledger, he had the envelope, he had the map, and Clara's document copies, which she had pressed into his hands at the last moment, saying they were no use to anyone if Strake found her before the ledger reached Denver. See, he had a tired old horse and a letter of authorization from a school teacher and no money, and the road to Millhaven was 15 miles through terrain he didn't know, with men somewhere between him and the other end who might or might not be watching. See, he had been in worse positions. He tried to remember which ones, and found several without much effort, which was either reassuring or a poor reflection on the life he'd been living, depending on how you looked at it. See, Matilda moved north at a pace that suggested she had opinions about urgency, but was willing to negotiate. See, Rhett let her find her stride. He needed her to last 15 miles, and he didn't need her to do it fast, just reliably. See, he had been riding for 20 minutes when the road curved around a stand of pine trees, and he came face to face with two men on horseback blocking the way forward. See, they were Strake's men. See, he knew it before they opened their mouths, the quality of stillness about them, the way they sat their horses, the way one of them had his hand resting on his thigh in a position that was 2 inches from his sidearm and meant to be noticed. See, the one on the left was younger, with a flat expression that Rhett had seen on men who were new to the specific work of intimidation and were working hard to look like they'd been doing it for years. See, the one on the right was older and had a scar along his jawline and looked at Rhett the way a man looks at a problem he is trying to categorize. See, morning, Rhett said. Road's closed, the older one said. See, didn't see a sign. You're seeing one now. He looked at Matilda with a slight curl of contempt that he didn't bother hiding. See, where are you headed? Millhaven, Rhett said. I'm delivering a letter for Miss Fenwick at the schoolhouse. See, she has family in Millhaven. Leave the letter with us. See, we'll see it gets there. She was specific about it being delivered personally. See, something about a family matter. He reached into his coat slowly, clearly, in a way that showed both his hands before one of them went inside the coat and produced Clara's letter of authorization. See, not the oilcloth, just the letter. He held it out. See, the older man leaned forward and took it and read it. See, his lips moved slightly. He handed it back. A schoolteacher's horse, he said. See, she's lending it for the delivery. Generous of her. See, she said her family appreciated reliability. Rhett kept his voice the same way he kept his hands in full view, doing nothing alarming. See, the two men looked at each other. Rhett watched the exchange without appearing to watch it. See, there was a decision being made. The older one was running probability the letter was real. The horse matched the description of the schoolteacher's horse that anyone in town could confirm. The man in front of them was nobody recognizable. See, and Strake's instruction had presumably been to watch for a man with a child and a specific bundle of documents. See, he wasn't a man with a child. The bundle was under his coat and not visible. See, the older man looked at him for another 5 seconds. See, go ahead, he said. Rhett touched his hat and rode forward. See, he did not increase his pace. He rode at exactly the same speed until the curve of the road took him around the next stand of trees and out of their line of sight. See, then he exhaled slowly and pressed his hand against his ribs where the oilcloth sat under his coat and felt the ledger there, solid and real. See, he had just ridden through the blockade. He kept moving north and did not look back. See, behind him, in the small housing behind the schoolhouse in Red Hollow, Maisie Calder sat in Clara Fenwick's only spare chair and ate a piece of bread with butter and listened to the town wake up around them and waited. See, she had gotten good at waiting. She had gotten good at most things she had not asked to be good at. See, she had 11 weeks of practice at survival and no practice at all at being still while someone else carried the things she'd been carrying. See, she ate the bread. She watched the door. She thought about a man who had arrived in town without a horse or a dollar and had followed her through a hole in a fence in the dark. See, she thought about the last line of her father's ledger. See, she held both of these things at the same time, the way you hold two things when one of them is loss, and the other is something that doesn't have a name yet but feels, cautiously, like it might matter. See, outside, Red Hollow went about its frightened morning business, and somewhere north of the pine trees, see, a gray mare named Matilda carried a man and a dead surveyor's life's work toward the road that led away from everything Gideon Strake thought he owned. See, Matilda had opinions about the North Road, and she expressed them consistently for the first 4 miles, a slight resistance in her gait, a tendency to drift toward the softer ground at the road's edge. See, the occasional pause that suggested she was reconsidering the entire enterprise. See, Rhett didn't fight her on any of it. See, he let her find her own argument with the terrain and settle it herself, because a horse you fought for 15 miles arrived differently than a horse you worked with, and he needed whatever she had left at the end of this. See, he had been on worse horses. He had been on horses that wanted to kill him, which Matilda clearly did not. See, she was simply old and had preferences. He could work with preferences. See, the road north curved through a series of low hills that blocked sight lines in both directions, which was good for not being seen and bad for not seeing. See, he kept to the right side where the tree cover came closest to the road and checked behind him at every curve. See, nobody following. Either the 2 men at the blockade had believed him or they had decided to let him go and report up, which meant someone ahead might be expecting him. See, he thought about that and decided there was nothing he could do about it except keep moving and pay attention. See, the oilcloth sat against his ribs, and he was aware of it the way you're aware of something that belongs to a dead man with a weight that isn't physical. See, Elias Calder had built this thing over 2 years and had almost finished it and had been stopped 3 days from the end. See, Wade Calloway had apparently been building the same thing years before that and had been stopped entirely, so thoroughly that no one in Red Hollow had ever mentioned his name until Rhett found it written in a dead man's margin. See, 2 men working the same problem from different ends, neither knowing about the other, both gone. See, he was the 3rd man. He had arrived without intention and without plan and without any of the equipment you would bring if you were planning to be the 3rd man. See, half a biscuit was what he'd had when it started. Half a biscuit and a bad back and a horse that had been taken from him and a reputation that had mostly dissolved over the last 2 years into something he didn't examine closely. See, he was aware that the situation was absurd. He was also aware that awareness of absurdity had never once changed the facts of a situation. See, he pressed his hand against the oilcloth and rode north. See, the town of Millhaven announced itself at mile 12 with the smell of a working settlement, coal smoke, and horse, and the particular density of a place where more people live than the land immediately around it would naturally support. See, it was larger than Red Hollow, a real stage town with a main street long enough to have a middle. See, he came in from the south on Matilda at a pace that said he had been riding a while, but was not running from anything, which was the exact impression he needed to make. See, the stage office was easy to find, the building with the painted schedule board and the bench outside it occupied by a man asleep with his hat over his face. See, Rhett dismounted and tied Matilda to the post and went inside. See, the man behind the counter was young and aggressively organized, with a desk so neat it looked like a demonstration of how a desk should look rather than a desk anyone actually used. See, Denver stage, Rhett said. Departs tomorrow at 6 in the morning. See, returns. I don't need the return. He put Clara's letter on the counter. See, I need to know if a document can ride as cargo rather than passenger. See, sealed. Addressed to the Territorial Land Office. See, the young man looked at the letter, then at Rhett. See, document cargo is available. There's a fee, 50 cents per sealed parcel, delivered to the Denver Central Office, then messengered to whatever department address you specify. See, Rhett had no money. He had been aware of this for some time and had been constructing around it. See, I can pay in Millhaven. I need to make an arrangement here and complete the payment in town. He paused. See, is there a bank? There's a bank. I need about 30 minutes. See, the young man looked at him with the specific expression of someone who is about to say no and is only laying him because they're deciding how to phrase it. See, I'm not asking you to hold a stage, Rhett said. I'm asking you to hold a spot on a stage that leaves tomorrow morning, which means I have tonight and the early morning to arrange payment. And if I don't appear with the payment before 6, see, you sell the spot to someone else and keep the cargo fee as a booking charge. He kept his voice level. See, I'm not asking for trust. I'm asking for standard booking terms. See, the young man thought about it. Name, he said. Calloway. See, he wrote it down. Spot is held until 5:45 tomorrow morning. See, don't be late. Rhett took the letter back and went out to Matilda and stood in the Millhaven street for a moment, doing the calculation he had been postponing since he left Red Hollow. See, he had no money. He needed 50 cents for the cargo fee, plus whatever a bank transaction would cost. See, he had a horse that wasn't his to sell, a coat with a torn shoulder seam, and a reputation for horsemanship that existed in a world 12 miles south where it currently did him no practical good. See, then he looked at the livery stable across the street and thought about a different angle entirely. See, the livery in Millhaven was run by a man named Gus Abernathy, which Rhett learned from the sign above the door. See, Abernathy himself was inside, doing something unpleasant to a horseshoe with a tool that was not intended for horseshoes. See, he was built like someone had assembled him from available materials, without a plan, broad through the shoulders, short through the legs, with hands that looked like they belonged on a larger man. See, you the owner, Rhett said. Last I checked, I have a horse outside that's been ridden 15 miles this morning on borrowed time. See, she needs water and feed and rest. I'll pay for her board when I collect her this afternoon. He paused. See, in return, I'd like 5 minutes of your time. Abernathy put down the horseshoe tool and looked at him. See, my time is not worth money. I'm not offering money. See, I'm offering information. I used to work with horses starting training problem animals. See, I've been off the circuit for a while. I'm looking to pick it back up, and I'm in the area, and I'm wondering if you know anyone in Millhaven or the surrounding territory who's got a horse they can't do anything with and is ready to discuss terms. See, Abernathy looked at him for a long moment, the look of a man who knows horse people and is running the version in front of him against the template in his head. See, what kind of horses? Any kind. My preference is animals that other people have given up on, because there's usually more argument than problem. See, but I'll look at anything. You got a name? Rhett Calloway. See, something happened in Abernathy's face. Not recognition, exactly more like the edge of recognition, the feeling of a name almost landing. See, there was a Calloway who used to work horses in this territory, he said. See, 5-6 years back. Before my time here, but I heard about him. See, Wade, I think. The name arrived in Rhett's chest the same way it had the first time, like something dropped from a height. See, my brother, he said. Abernathy went quiet. Then he came through here. See, before I took over this livery, but I bought it from the man who had it, and he mentioned a Calloway who knew horses better than anyone he'd seen. See, said he could settle a frightened animal just by standing near it. He paused. See, he said your brother came through twice. Second time he was in a hurry. See, when? Do you know when? Year before I bought the place. See, that'd be 4.5 years ago, maybe 5. He picked up the horseshoe tool and set it down again, in a different place, a gesture that had nothing to do with the horseshoe. See, he didn't say where he was headed. Man I bought from said he seemed pressed. See, like he was carrying something and moving fast. Wade had been through Millhaven. See, moving fast, carrying something, trying to get out. See, trying to get what he had to someone who could use it. See, did he make it? Rhett asked. He kept his voice even. See, the man who sold you this place, did he know what happened to my brother? See, Abernathy looked at him with the particular steadiness of a man delivering news he doesn't want to deliver. See, he said a man fitting your brother's description was found on the road north of Millhaven, maybe 2 weeks after that second visit. See, no horse, no documents, no identification on him. A pause. See, he was buried in the county cemetery north of town. See, marker says unknown. Rhett stood in the livery stable and breathed. See, Wade had made it to Millhaven, had been moving, had been 2 weeks from gone, not gone to the life he'd chosen without looking back, not gone because he'd decided the family was more weight than he wanted to carry. See, gone because someone had stopped him on the road north of this town and made sure he didn't deliver what he was carrying. See, buried as unknown. He had spent 6 years calling his brother selfish inside his own head, in the dark private part of his thoughts where the things you're ashamed of sit and wait. See, 6 years of a story about a man who left because leaving was easier than staying. See, and the whole time his brother had been in the ground 20 miles north, in a grave with no name on it, because the evidence he was carrying was more dangerous than the man carrying it. See, I need to see that grave, Rhett said. His voice sounded different to him. See, flatter. It's about 4 miles north, Abernathy said. See, he said it gently, which Rhett would not have expected from a man who looked like assembled materials. See, county cemetery on the left side of the road. The unknown markers are along the east wall. See, I know, Rhett said. Then I'll be back for the horse this afternoon. See, he walked out of the livery and stood on the Millhaven street in the thin autumn light, and stood there for 60 seconds, doing nothing at all, which was not something he did. See, then he walked to the bank. The bank manager in Millhaven was a careful man named Pritchard, who wore a suit that was too good for the town and knew it, and had decided to treat it as an aspiration. See, Rhett sat across from him and explained the situation in a version stripped of everything that would sound alarming to a careful man in a good suit. See, he had documents belonging to the estate of a deceased individual in Red Hollow that needed to be delivered to the Territorial Land Office in Denver on the morning stage. See, he needed 50 cents for the cargo fee. He was a horse trainer by profession currently engaged by the livery on the main street and could have the 50 cents plus any applicable transaction fee returned by end of day. See, Pritchard looked at him for a long time. The livery, he said. See, Abernathy, Rhett said. You can confirm it. Pritchard sent a boy to confirm it. See, the boy came back in 4 minutes and said yes. Abernathy had a man's horse in his yard and had spoken to him about work. See, Pritchard looked at the ledger column in front of him and looked at Rhett and made a calculation of his own. See, 50 cents, he said, against your confirmed return today. See, that's right. Pritchard counted out 50 cents from his drawer with the expression of a man who had made worse bets on less information and knew it. See, Rhett took the 50 cents back to the stage office. See, the neat young man behind the counter took it without expression and stamped a form and put Elias Calder's sealed envelope, wrapped in the oilcloth with the map and Clara's document copies, see, into a leather pouch that he labeled with the Territorial Land Office address in Denver. See, he gave Rhett a receipt. The receipt was a small piece of paper with a number on it. See, Rhett looked at it for a moment. This was what 4 years of a dead man's work came down to: physically a folded piece of paper the size of a playing card and a leather pouch riding a stage northeast. See, it was not enough. He knew it. The ledger was powerful, but getting it to Denver was only getting it to Denver. See, the people at the Territorial Land Office would need to act on it, and acting on it would mean going against a man who had demonstrated across years and counties that he was capable of making people disappear. See, he walked 4 miles north to the county cemetery. See, the unknown markers were along the east wall, as Abernathy had said. See, plain stones, no names, dates only where dates were known. See, he walked the row slowly. The stones were weathered, some going back 15 years. See, he found a marker with a date that corresponded to 4.5 years ago and stood in front of it for a long time. See, he had nothing to leave, no words that seemed right. See, he stood in the thin Colorado light in front of a stone that might or might not mark his brother's grave, and thought about a man who had seen something wrong and had decided to press against it until it gave, or until something gave first. See, the same stubbornness Maisie had described in Elias. See, the same quality, the same refusal to look away from the thing you had seen. See, he thought about how the Calloway family apparently produced men who could not let go of a problem they had found, and how this quality had killed one of them, and possibly two, and how he was now the third iteration of the same impulse. See, walking around with a dead man's ledger under his coat in a county controlled by the man the ledger was aimed at. See, he thought about Maisie sitting in Clara Fenwick's spare chair, eating bread with butter and waiting. See, he walked back to Millhaven. He fulfilled the arrangement with Abernathy, helped him assess 3 horses in the afternoon, including one that had developed a vicious head toss that was entirely about the bit and was resolved in 40 minutes. See, which visibly impressed Abernathy in the way of a man not easily impressed. See, Abernathy paid him $1.50. Rhett returned 75 cents to Pritchard at the bank, plus a dime for the accommodation. See, he ate a meal at the counter of a small restaurant near the livery, the first real meal he had eaten in 4 days, which he did not think about until he was halfway through it and realized his hands had been slightly unsteady since he sat down. See, he sat in the restaurant after he was done and thought about what happened next. See, the ledger was on its way to Denver. That was done. See, but done didn't mean finished, and he understood this clearly. See, the evidence reaching Denver was necessary, but it was not sufficient. See, territorial investigators moved at the pace of territorial investigators, which was the pace of men with too much territory and not enough certainty. See, who needed the evidence to be not just persuasive, but undeniable before they would move against a man with Strake's resources. See, that could take weeks. It could take longer, and in the meantime, Strake would know the ledger was gone. See, he would know someone had taken it from the homestead. See, he would be drawing the connections: the freight shed, the homestead, a strange man, and Elias Calder's missing daughter, and he would be moving toward something conclusive. See, because Gideon Strake had not built what he'd built by waiting to see how things developed. See, Rhett needed to get back to Red Hollow. He knew this the same way he knew a horse's next move, for the horse made it not from thinking, from feeling the shape of the situation through whatever it was in him that read things that way. See, Maisie and Clara were in that town. Clara's document copies had gone in the pouch with the ledger, which meant if Strake searched Clara's rooms, now he would find nothing. See, but nothing was only safe if Strake didn't know she had ever had something. See, and if he'd been watching Elias closely enough to move on him 3 days before Denver, he'd been watching Elias's connections too. See, Clara Fenwick had been one of those connections. He needed to move. See, he collected Matilda from Abernathy's yard. Abernathy came out as he was saddling her. See, "Road south, been busy today," Abernathy said. He said it without looking at Rhett directly, which was the way people offered information they wanted you to have without formally involving themselves. See, 3 riders went through midday, coming back about an hour ago. See, moving faster than they went. Were they the kind of men who had a reason to move fast? See, they were the kind of men who work for someone with enough money to make riding all day someone else's problem. He paused. See, you know Strake? By reputation. Then you know what kind of men they were. He stepped back. See, I knew your brother by 1 degree of separation, and I don't know you at all. See, but Wade Calloway was described to me as a straight man doing a difficult thing, and I have a sense about family resemblance. He paused once more. See, South Road's not the only way back. Is there another? See, longer. Comes in from the west, through the Beaumont land. See, it's a ranch road mostly. Adds 2 hours, any chance of company on it? See, less than the South Road tonight. Rhett looked at him. See, why are you telling me this? Abernathy picked up a bucket and turned toward the water trough. See, because I bought this livery from a man who watched a straight man pass through here moving fast, and then heard he ended up in a ditch, he said. See, and I didn't want to carry that a second time. He walked away with his bucket and didn't look back. See, Rhett rode west out of Millhaven and picked up the ranch road and turned south. See, Matilda had eaten and rested, and was moving with more willingness than she had shown all morning. Her opinion of the day apparently improved by the afternoon's treatment. See, the road was what Abernathy had described a working track through grazing territory, unpaved, soft in places, cutting through fenced pastures via gates that stood open at both ends and had clearly stood open long enough to be permanent. See, the western sky was beginning to color toward evening. See, he had 4 hours of light, maybe less, and 2 hours of road. See, he was 40 minutes out of Millhaven when he heard the second set of hoofbeats. See, not behind him, ahead of him and to the left, moving parallel to the track through a stand of scrub pine, pacing him. See, not gaining, not falling back, matching him. He did not change his pace. See, he kept Matilda moving at the same steady rate and used his peripheral vision to track the motion in the trees without turning his head. See, one horse, one rider, moving carefully through territory they knew. See, he came to a gate and stopped to open it, and while he was stopped, he turned fully to look at the trees and said, at a volume that would carry 30 feet without shouting, "You're welcome to ride on the road." See, it's easier. A pause. Then the pines moved and a horse came out. A bay with a rider who was considerably younger than Rhett, had been braced for a boy of 16 or 17, angular and watchful. See, with the particular look of a young man who had grown up fast because someone needed him to. See, you came from town, the boy said, not a question. See, Red Hollow. Yes, you're with the girl. Rhett looked at him. See, who's asking? Pete Hendrick. He straightened slightly on his horse. See, my father owns the South Quarter land. Elias Calder was our neighbor for 4 years. His jaw was set in the way of someone who has been carrying something heavy and is deciding whether to put it down. See, Miss Calder and my father were friends. When she disappeared, my father looked for her. See, Strake's men told him she was taken in by family in Denver. He paused. See, but last week my father saw her in the alley behind the East Street. See, she didn't see him. He didn't say anything to her because he didn't know who else was watching. He looked at Rhett steadily. See, he's been waiting to know if she was all right. Rhett sat on Matilda and read the boy in front of him, the way he read horses, the posture, the way he held the reins, the set of his shoulders. See, not calculating, not performing, just delivering what he had been sent to deliver. See, she's all right, Rhett said. She's with someone she trusts. See, the boy exhaled, one small breath. My father wants to help. See, he's been wanting to help since October. His voice caught slightly on the last word, and he tightened his jaw against it, which Rhett understood and didn't comment on. See, he couldn't find a way in. He didn't know who else might be watching, and he couldn't risk the family. See, but he said if she was with someone who had a plan, he wanted to be part of it. See, does your father know other families in the South Quarter who feel the same? See, he knows the Beaumonts and old Virgil Tate and the Garrison family. See, he's spoken to them carefully. The boy met his eyes. See, they're not brave, Mr. Calloway. I want to be honest about that. See, they've been frightened for a long time, and frightened people do things they're not proud of. See, but they're angry. They've been angry since Strake took the Morrison place last spring, and the Morrisons left with nothing. He paused. See, my father says anger is the thing that's left when everything else runs out. See, Rhett thought about what Clara had said about Clara's own anger, the thing that told you a person hadn't made peace with how things were. See, he thought about a schoolteacher who had been hand-copying documents for 14 months in a building nobody watched. See, he thought about an 8-year-old girl who had survived 11 weeks alone by being smarter than the people looking for her. See, he thought about what Strake was going to do when he realized the ledger was gone. See, what's your father's name? Rhett said. Daniel Hendrick. See, tell your father the evidence has been sent to Denver. See, tell him it left on the Millhaven stage with the Territorial Land Office address on it. He watched the boy's face process this. See, tell him the people in Denver will need time, and tell him that while they're taking their time, Strake is going to figure out what happened, and he is going to move to close it down before anyone from Denver comes through. See, what does that mean for us? It means the families in the South Quarter need to be ready for what comes after, Rhett said. See, not before, after. When Strake makes his move and it's visible when it can't be done quietly, that's when it matters that people aren't alone. He paused. See, can you get a message to your father tonight? I'm going home now, the boy said. See, he'll have it before dark. Then go, Rhett urged Matilda forward through the gate. See, tell him Maisie Calder is safe and the ledger is on its way to Denver. See, tell him the man who brought it there is Calloway, Rhett Calloway. See, and tell him to keep his family close and wait for the thing that can't be hidden. See, Pete Hendrick turned his bay horse and looked at Rhett one more time. See, the boy's face in the late afternoon light had something in it that Rhett had not seen in Red Hollow at all, something that was the opposite of the careful avoidance he had seen on every face on every boardwalk since he'd arrived. See, not bravery exactly, more like the early stages of bravery, the part where you choose a direction before you know if you can walk it. See, Mr. Calloway, the boy said, did Elias die because of the ledger? See, the question was direct and deserved a direct answer. See, yes, Rhett said. Pete Hendrick nodded once, like a period at the end of a sentence. See, then he turned his horse and pushed it into a canter and disappeared through the scrub pine heading southeast toward his father's land. See, Rhett watched him go. Then he turned back to the road and kept moving south. See, the light was dropping fast now, and Matilda's shadow went long ahead of them. See, he thought about what he was riding back to. Strake would know something had shifted. See, his men had lost track of a man they didn't know, and a girl they'd been hunting for 11 weeks, and the homestead had been searched twice, and the freight shed had been compromised, and nothing had been found. See, that kind of accumulating failure would be pushing against a man who did not tolerate accumulating failure. See, he would escalate. That was what men like Strake did when the quiet methods stopped working. See, they escalated, and when they escalated, they became visible, and visibility was the one and thing they were supposed to avoid. See, that was the logic anyway. The logic was clean, and Rhett had assembled it carefully, and he believed it was correct. And he also knew that logic was what you had when the situation was running at the pace you expected. See, and situations had a habit of not running at the pace you expected. See, he was still 6 miles from Red Hollow when Matilda lifted her head and her ears went sharp and she slowed without being asked. See, Rhett was already listening. From somewhere south and east, from the direction of Red Hollow, came a sound that the distance and the hills softened into something almost indistinct, but that he had heard before in other contexts. See, and recognized without needing to hear it clearly. See, raised voices. Not one or two, many, and under them, barely carrying this far, the sound of something burning. See, he pressed his heels into Matilda's sides, and she moved, old legs, finding something she hadn't offered all day. The sound ahead working on her the same way it worked on him, not understanding it, just feeling the urgency in it. See, the way animals feel the thing that is wrong before the thing is visible. See, he came over the last hill above Red Hollow at a pace Matilda had not been asked to sustain in years, and he saw the light before he saw the town. See, it was not the schoolhouse. That was the first thing he checked, and it was not that. See, it was the freight shed. The building Maisie had lived in for 11 weeks was burning, and the orange light of it reached far enough that he could see figures moving in the street in front of it, not one or two figures. See, not the quiet professional movement of Strake's hired men doing their work in the dark. See, dozens of figures. The whole visible end of Red Hollow's population, drawn by light and noise from their careful private lives into the public street. See, and standing in the center of that street, in the light of a burning building, was a figure too small to be anything but an 8-year-old girl. See, Rhett did not remember urging Matilda down the hill. See, he was just suddenly going down it, faster than he should have been in the dark. The town rising up around him as he came in from the North Road, and the burning freight shed at the south end throwing its light across everything. See, and the voices louder now, and Maisie standing in the middle of the street with her arms slightly away from her body the way she stood when she was working up to something she knew was risky. See, he pulled Matilda up at the edge of the crowd and came off her before she had fully stopped, which he would not have recommended to anyone else, and moved through the gathered people toward the center. See, they moved aside without his asking because of Matilda's momentum and his momentum, and because people move aside when something comes through them with that particular quality of direction. See, he got through to the open space where Maisie stood. See, Clara Fenwick was 2 steps behind Maisie, and the expression on her face was one Rhett had not seen from her before, not the contained watchfulness he'd observed that morning, but something harder and more open. See, the face of a woman who had made a decision that could not be unmade. See, in front of Maisie, 5 feet away, stood Gideon Strake. See, he was the most ordinary-looking man Rhett had ever built up a picture of. See, that was the first thing that struck him ordinary, in the way of someone who had spent years making sure nothing about his surface invited challenge. See, medium height, medium build, the quality clothes of a man with money worn without flourish, a face that was controlled in every feature except the eyes. See, the eyes were doing something his face was not, and what they were doing was the look of a man who has found what he has been hunting and is deciding how to take it from a context that is not yet fully under his control. See, he had not seen Rhett arrive. He was looking at Maisie. See, your father's property burned, he said to her, indicating the freight shed behind her with a tilt of his head that did not turn his eyes from her face. See, tragic. He said it the way a man says something that is the opposite of what he means, without bothering to make the translation subtle. See, I wonder if it might be safer if you came with us while the investigation. See, the ledger is in Denver, Maisie said. The crowd did not go quiet because it had never been loud. These were frightened people in the street, speaking in the low voices of frightened people. See, but something shifted in the quality of the air around those words. See, Strake's expression did not change. This was the thing about a man like Strake, the expression didn't change. See, the eyes did. I beg your pardon, he said. My father's ledger, Maisie said. See, her voice was steady in a way that should not have been possible for someone her age standing in front of this man in the light of a burning building. See, the one documenting everything you did to every family in this county. See, it's in Denver, at the Territorial Land Office. She paused. See, it left this morning. Rhett stepped out of the crowd into the open space beside her. See, Strake saw him. The 2 men looked at each other. No introduction was needed, and none was made. See, you must be the new problem, Strake said. The old problem, Rhett said. See, you just didn't know about it yet. Strake looked at him with the eyes that were doing the thing his face wasn't. See, the calculation was visible in them now. See, running fast, who is this? See, what does he know? See, what has he already done? See, can this still be managed quietly? See, Rhett watched the calculation run and watched it arrive at an answer that Strake did not like. See, whatever you've sent to Denver, Strake said, turning back to Maisie because Maisie was the one he had decided was the point of vulnerability, a child's accusation. See, it's a surveyor's ledger, Rhett said. 27 properties documented with primary sources. See, payment records for 14 county officials, deeds signed by men who were dead at the time of signing. See, and copies of all of it in a separate hand, made by a person whose professional reputation in this town is considerably better than yours. He kept his voice the same way. Strake kept his face controlled, without fluctuation. See, it's not an accusation, it's an accounting. The street was very quiet. See, Strake stood in the firelight and understood that something had changed in the last 30 seconds. See, not just in the information available to territorial investigators in Denver. See, in the street in front of him, in the faces of the people standing in a ring around this confrontation who had just heard a stranger say the things they had known and not said for 3 years. See, you don't know who you're dealing with, Strake said. See, it was quieter than anything else he had said. The kind of quiet that in other circumstances would have been a threat. See, I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Rhett said. See, I know his name, and I know his methods, and I know the names of every property he stole and every official he paid to help him steal it. He paused. See, so does the Territorial Land Office, as of this morning. See, Strake looked at him for a long moment. See, then he looked at the people around them, the Hendricks, possibly, and the Beaumonts, and the people from the main street who had come out for the fire and found themselves in a different kind of moment than they had expected. See, he looked at them and they looked back. The quality of the looking was not what it had been. See, something in it had shifted, some weight of certainty that Strake had always been able to rely on. The certainty that the watching would be from behind closed expressions and bowed heads. See, these people were not looking at their boots. Gideon Strake took one step back. See, it was barely visible. A single step, the smallest possible retreat, and he likely did not know he had done it. See, but Rhett saw it, and Clara Fenwick saw it, and Maisie Calder, who had been standing in the center of this open space for longer than Rhett wanted to think about, alone before he arrived, saw it too. See, and in the ring of faces around them, in the firelight of a burning shed, the people of Red Hollow saw it. See, one step back, it was not the end. Rhett knew that clearly. See, Strake had money and lawyers and connections that would take months to untangle, and he had men who were still somewhere in this town and on these roads, and a single confrontation in a public street was not a verdict. See, there was a long way still to go, but it was something that had not been there before. See, it was the first crack in a wall that had been seamless for 3 years. See, Maisie stood in the firelight and did not move, and Rhett stood beside her, and neither of them looked away. See, that one step back did not end anything. Rhett had known it wouldn't, and the knowing of it kept him alert through the next hour, in a way that the confrontation itself, oddly, had not required. See, confrontations have a clarity to them. It's the aftermath that gets complicated. See, Strake withdrew, not in defeat that would come later, in a different form, but in the way of a man recalculating. See, he turned and walked back through the ring of watching people, and his hired men closed around him, and the crowd let him go because crowds let men like Strake go even when they are angry. See, because anger and action are two different things, and the distance between them is where fear lives. See, he walked to his horse without looking back and rode north toward the big house on the hill, and his men followed. See, and the street was left with the people who lived in it, and the diminishing orange light of the burning freight shed, and the particular silence of a moment that has been significant, but is not yet resolved. See, the shed burned itself down. There was nothing to save in it Maisie's blanket roll, her tin cup, her flour sack pillow, the 11 weeks of survival that had been its own kind of life. See, gone. She stood and watched it go without the expression Rhett expected, which would have been grief or anger. See, she watched it the way you watch something be done, not without feeling, but with the feeling of someone who had already mourned it by anticipation. In the weeks, she had lived there, knowing it was temporary, and that temporary things end. See, Daniel Hendrick found them within 20 minutes. See, he was a broad, quiet man in his 50s, with the permanent squint of someone who had spent 30 years reading landscape, and he came through the thinning crowd with Pete behind him and shook Rhett's hand without preamble. See, my boy found me on the South Road, he said. Told me what you said. He looked at Rhett steadily. See, you sent the ledger this morning. It's on the Denver stage. See, Hendrick absorbed this. How long before someone in Denver does something with it? See, I don't know. Could be 2 weeks. Could be longer. Rhett looked at him. See, Strake will move before then. He knows what's coming, and he knows the only way to stop it is to discredit the source or remove it. See, remove it meaning the ledger traveled, but the people who know what's in it are still here. He paused. See, Maisie. Clara, you now. The Beaumonts and old Virgil Tate, if they've been talking to you the way your son suggested. See, Hendrick's jaw tightened. What do you need from us? See, not tonight, Rhett said. Tonight Strake is recalculating. See, he won't move tonight because he's not sure what we've already put in motion, and moving too fast is what turns a manageable situation into one with witnesses. He looked at the dying light of the shed. See, but tomorrow or the next day, he'll have a new plan, and it won't be subtle. See, when a man like Strake loses the quiet option, he doesn't become cautious. See, he becomes direct. Hendrick looked at Clara, who had been standing slightly apart listening without appearing to listen, which seemed to be a skill she had developed alongside the document copying and the early mornings. See, your schoolhouse, he said to her, if they come for it. See, they won't find anything, Clara said. I sent everything with him. She indicated Rhett without ceremony. See, the rooms are clean. They'll still come, Hendrick said. See, I know. She said it flatly. Let them come. Pete Hendrick was watching Maisie with the expression of a boy who has been told a thing is happening and is now experiencing the gap between the telling and the actual reality of it. See, Maisie had not spoken since she said the words that had shifted the weight of the crowd. The ledger is in Denver, and she had been standing at the edge of the group since Strake left, watching the shed burn. See, now she felt Pete looking at her and turned. My father used to call your father the most honest man in the territory, Pete said awkwardly. See, Maisie looked at him. He was, she said. It didn't make things easier for him. See, no, Pete agreed. But my father also said it was why he was worth listening to. See, Maisie turned back to the shed. The last of the structure was going down now, the roof beams giving way inward, and the light was shrinking to something that would be ash by morning. See, she watched it until it was small enough that it was just fire doing what fire does, and then she turned away and did not look at it again. See, they stayed at Clara Fenwick's that night, Rhett on the floor with his coat for a blanket, Maisie's in the spare chair that had become her provisional home, Clara in her own bed with her door open, which was not sentiment but practicality. See, she wanted to hear if anyone came to the back door in the night. See, nobody came. The following morning, Red Hollow woke up different. See, not transformed. Nothing is transformed in a morning. See, but different in the way that a room is different after someone has opened a window that has been shut for a long time, the same room, the same furniture, the same wallpaper, but the air in it has changed and you notice it before you can name it. See, people came out of their houses at the usual hour and went about the usual business and looked at each other in the street, and the looking was different. See, two women stopped in front of the dry goods store and spoke in regular voices rather than the near whisper that had become the town's default register. See, three men stood in front of the barber shop, and one of them said the name Strake out loud in a sentence that was not a compliment, and the other two did not immediately look at their boots. See, small things. But Rhett had learned enough about the way fear works in communities to understand that small things were how it started, and large things were only possible after the small things had happened first. See, he was in the street by 7 with no particular purpose except to be visible. See, he had decided this in the night, lying on Clara's floor with his coat over him, that visibility was the thing required of him now. See, not action yet, not the confrontation that was coming, but the simple fact of being present and seen and not afraid. Because in a town where everyone had learned to make themselves small, see, one person refusing to was a more powerful statement than any speech. See, he stood on the Main Street boardwalk in the morning light, and people noticed him, and some of them nodded, and some of them looked away, and a few looked away, and then looked back, which was the most interesting group. See, looking back was the beginning of something. Old Virgil Tate found him at 8 o'clock. See, Tate was 73, and moved like a man carrying structural damage. He had negotiated terms with slightly sideways, one shoulder lower than the other, with a cane he used not for balance but for emphasis. See, driving it against the boardwalk as punctuation for his sentences. See, he had a face like a terrain feature, all ridges and shadows, and eyes that were still young and completely present. See, you're the Calloway boy, he said. Not a question. See, Rhett Calloway. Your brother came through here 6 years ago. He said it the way Abernathy had said it, as information offered rather than conversation made. See, I was on the County Road Commission at the time. We had a meeting about the Harker land transfer, which was the first one I saw that didn't sit right. See, Wade Calloway came to that meeting, sat in the back. See, asked 3 questions that the county man couldn't answer without contradicting himself. He paused, driving the cane once. See, best 3 questions I'd heard in 20 years of county meetings. See, Rhett stood in the morning light and let this settle. See, what happened at the meeting? He asked. The county man came back a week later with revised answers that didn't contradict themselves, and the Harker transfer went through, and I never saw your brother again. Tate looked at him steadily. See, I have thought about those 3 questions for 6 years. See, I should have made more noise about them at the time. See, I didn't because I was 67, and the county man had Strake's backing, and I had a ranch and a daughter, and I made the calculation that most people make. He let a beat go by. See, I was wrong. You were cautious, Rhett said. That's not the same thing. See, it is the same thing when caution is the reason an honest man ends up in a ditch on the North Road. He drove the cane again. See, I'm done being cautious. Tell me what you need. I need to know who in the South Quarter is ready to stand in front of this publicly, Rhett said. See, not armed, not confrontational, just present, visible. See, when the territorial investigators come from Denver, they need to find people who will say what they know and sign their names to it. See, Tate looked at him. You really think Denver will come? See, I think Denver will come if enough people make enough noise that not coming becomes more difficult than coming. He paused. See, the ledger is evidence. Evidence needs witnesses. See, without people willing to say what happened to them personally, a ledger is just columns of numbers and a dead man's handwriting. See, people are afraid. I know, they've been afraid for 3 years. See, I know that too. Tate was quiet for a moment. Then, what happened last night in the street? See, when the girl said the ledger was in Denver, he looked sideways, toward the south end of the street, where the ash of the freight shed was still visible. See, I haven't seen Strake back down from anything in 3 years. See, not one time. He paused. He stepped back. He did. See, from a child. From a child who wasn't afraid of him, Rhett said. See, that was the thing he stepped back from. He's used to fear. See, he's built everything on it. When someone stands in front of him without it, he doesn't know what to do. See, Tate considered this with the seriousness it deserved, turning it over. See, then he said, I'll have 5 families at Daniel Hendrick's place by this afternoon. See, I can't speak for all of them, but I can get them in a room, and you can speak for yourself. See, that's all I'm asking. Tate nodded once and walked away with his cane punctuating his steps, and Rhett stood on the boardwalk and watched him go. See, that afternoon he found himself in Daniel Hendrick's front room with 14 adults, and Pete Hendrick standing along the back wall, and Maisie sitting on the stairs, but she had refused to stay at Clara's, and no argument Rhett made held up. See, against her particular brand of immovable patience. See, Clara was there too, seated by the window in her schoolteacher posture, saying nothing, but missing nothing either. See, he did not make a speech. He had no gift for speeches and no interest in developing one. See, he laid out facts. The ledger was in Denver. The Territorial Land Office would receive it within 4 days. See, the evidence it contained was documented across primary sources and corroborated by independent copies. See, Strake's operation was exposed in a way that could be prosecuted, but prosecution required witnesses, people willing to put their names on statements describing what they had experienced personally. See, he said what it might cost them. He did not minimize it. See, Strake still had money and still had lawyers and still had men, And the period between now and whenever Denver acted would be a period of danger for anyone who had visibly opposed him. See, he said this clearly because they deserved clarity, because they had been managed and manipulated by someone who specialized in controlling the information people had access to, and the least he could do was be honest about the picture. See, there was a silence after he finished. Then a woman near the back small, somewhere in her 60s, with her hands folded in her lap, said, "My husband signed a deed transfer under duress." See, he was told if he didn't sign, something would happen to the children. She said it quietly. See, not dramatically, like a person releasing a pressure that had been building for a long time. See, he's been ashamed of it since. He would testify to that. See, where is he? Rhett asked. He won't come to meetings. See, but he'll sign a statement if I bring it to him. She paused. See, his shame has been harder on him than the land loss. See, he needs someone to tell him that signing under duress is not the same as consenting. See, it's not, Clara said from her chair by the window. See, she said it simply, without weight, the way a teacher says a thing that is true and wants it received without resistance. See, legally and otherwise. A signature obtained by threat is not a valid signature. See, that's in the ledger. Elias documented the methods, not just the results. See, the woman nodded slowly. 3 more people spoke after that. See, not brave declarations, messy, imprecise, personal accounts of what had happened to them or their neighbors, the kind of testimony that is hard to listen to, not because it is dramatic, but because it is ordinary. See, fear dressed up in ordinary clothes, doing ordinary damage. See, a man who had moved his family into a smaller property because Strake's people had made clear that contesting the deed transfer would result in his business license being revoked. See, a widow whose late husband's land had been reclassified after his death in a process she didn't understand and couldn't afford a lawyer to challenge. See, a young man, barely 20, who had come to Red Hollow from his family's ruined homestead 2 counties over and recognized the pattern here from what he had grown up watching. See, by the time the room went quiet, Rhett had 7 people willing to give statements and 3 more who wanted to speak to their families first. See, he took what was offered. Demanding more from people who had spent 3 years being diminished was not a strategy. It was a performance of his own virtue at their expense. See, he was not interested in performing virtue. He was interested in what actually worked. See, that evening, sitting at Hendrick's kitchen table with a pen and a stack of paper Clara had brought from the schoolhouse, he helped 7 people write the clearest version of what they knew. See, not what they felt, what they knew, what they had seen, what they had been told, and by whom and when. See, he asked questions and listened and went back over the details until the statements were precise, because vague is the thing that lawyers work with, and precise is the thing that survives a lawyer. See, Maisie sat beside him at the table and read each statement after it was finished, which no one had asked her to do, but no one stopped her. See, she caught 2 errors, a wrong date in one account, a property name that had been transposed. See, Rhett corrected them without comment, which seemed to be exactly the right response because she moved to the next statement without comment either. See, at 9 o'clock that night, with 7 signed statements, in addition to the ledger and the envelope, and Clara's copies already in Denver. See, Rhett sat back in the chair and felt the particular exhaustion of someone who has been running a long time and has finally reached the point where running is no longer the primary requirement. See, the primary requirement now was waiting, and waiting was its own kind of hard. See, he did not sleep well for the next 2 days. See, Strake's men were visible in town, but they moved differently, less like men executing a plan, and more like men waiting for instructions that had not yet come, which told him the recalculation was still running. See, Strake was intelligent enough to know that acting directly would accelerate exactly what he was trying to prevent. See, the moment he made an obvious move against Maisie or Clara or the Hendrick family, he confirmed every word in the ledger in the eyes of the people watching. See, so he waited, and Rhett waited, and the town of Red Hollow held itself in that particular suspended tension of a situation that has not yet resolved, but has passed the point where it can return to what it was. See, On the third day, the first rider came from Denver. See, he was a territorial investigator named Aldous Marsh, thin and deliberate, with a methodical quality that reminded Rhett of Elias Calder, the same patience with detail, the same preference for evidence over assertion. See, he arrived without announcement on a roan horse with territorial markings and presented himself at Clara Fenwick's door at 7 in the morning with a copy of the Ledger's cover page and a letter from the Territorial Land Commissioner. See, he sat at Clara's table for 3 hours and read the statements and asked questions in the particular way of a man who is not trying to be convinced, but is trying to find the holes before someone else does. See, he found 2 things he wanted clarified, and Rhett clarified them, pulling from memory what the ledger contained on those specific points. See, Marsh wrote in his notebook for a long time. Then he closed it. See, this is sufficient to open a formal investigation, he said. See, that's not a verdict, and it's not an arrest. It means we can compel access to the land office records and the bank records and require the county officials named here to make themselves available for questioning. See, how long? Clara asked. To complete? Months, possibly more. He looked at her. See, to make an initial move to demonstrate to the people in this county that this is being taken seriously a week, maybe 10 days. See, what does an initial move look like? Rhett asked. See, it looks like 3 investigators and 2 territorial marshals arriving in Red Hollow and beginning the process of securing original documents before they can be altered or destroyed. He paused. See, Mr. Strake will be notified that he is subject to investigation and advised not to leave the territory. See, the room was quiet. Will he run? Clara asked. Marsh looked at her without expression. See, men like Strake rarely run. They're too committed to the position they've built. See, they believe they can outlast it. Another pause. Sometimes they're right. See, he looked at Rhett. The evidence you've assembled is strong. See, I want to be direct with you. It's some of the strongest documentation of systematic land fraud I have seen in 12 years of this work. See, the primary source corroboration is unusual. The detail is unusual. He paused. See, whoever put this together understood what would be needed. See, he was a surveyor, Rhett said. He spent his life making things precise. See, Marsh nodded once. The deceased. Elias Calder. Rhett said the name in full because it deserved to be said in full. See, and before him, a man named Wade Calloway, who was doing the same work before Calder found it and who was stopped before he could get it out. See, Marsh wrote both names in his notebook. They'll be part of the formal record, he said. See, the investigation and everything that results from it. See, Maisie had been sitting on the stairs again, in the position that had become her default in Clara's house present, but at the edge, listening without being in the way. See, at the mention of her father's name, she looked up, and the expression on her face was not the composure Rhett had been watching for days. See, it was something underneath the composure, something that had been waiting for the composure to have a reason to relax. See, she didn't cry. She pressed her lips together and breathed through her nose and looked at the wall above Marsh's head for 3 seconds. See, then she was composed again. But in those 3 seconds, Rhett saw what 11 weeks of discipline had been holding in place, and it was considerable, and it was the appropriate size for everything that had happened to her. See, he looked away to give her the 3 seconds. Marsh left that morning and returned to Denver, and the days that followed had the quality of a held breath. See, Strake's men were still in town, but thinner now. Some of them had been seen leaving on the South Road and not returning, which was its own kind of information. See, the men who stayed moved more carefully, like men reconsidering their employer's longevity as a practical business question. See, the town of Red Hollow did something during those days that Rhett had not predicted and could not have engineered. See, it began to talk, not loudly, not in the heroic manner of people who have decided to be brave. See, in the ordinary manner of people who have been relieved of a pressure they had been under for so long they had forgotten it was external. See, the conversation at the dry goods counter that used to stop when it reached certain subjects now kept going. See, the men in front of the barber shop were more of them and louder. See, A family who had left Red Hollow 18 months ago came back through and stopped for supplies. And when they said they were thinking about returning, the man behind the counter said that might not be as complicated as they thought and told them why. See, small things. The small things adding up. See, Clara opened the school every morning and taught every day. And the parents who brought their children looked at the schoolhouse differently now, like something they had not thought of as theirs had been returned to them. See, Pete Hendrick, who had been tracking Rhett since the ranch road outside Millhaven, began appearing wherever Rhett was with the specific energy of a young man who has decided on a direction and is looking for a model of how to walk it. See, Rhett did not mentor him in any formal sense. He was not equipped for formal senses of things, but he answered the questions Pete asked directly and did not talk down to him, which seemed to be the thing Pete had needed most from someone older. See, 9 days after Marsh's visit, the territorial marshals arrived. See, there were 2 of them, with 3 investigators behind, and they arrived in the morning on the main street of Red Hollow without announcement, and the whole town saw them come in, and the whole town understood what they were. See, they went to the land office first. The man behind the counter at the land office tried to tell them the records they were requesting would require a formal written application to the county commissioner. See, and one of the marshals put a letter with the territorial seal on the counter and said the application had been submitted and approved, and they would begin now. See, Strake appeared on the main street an hour after the marshals. See, he walked from the direction of his house, and he was alone, which was the first time Rhett had seen him without the buffer of men around him, and the absence of them changed the size of him in a way that was instructive. See, he was just a man, an ordinary-looking man in good clothes who had built something large on a foundation of other people's fear, and when the fear went, the foundation went with it, and what was left was just the ordinary man. See, he stopped on the main street and looked at the land office, where the investigators were visible through the window working through the filing cabinets, and he stood there for a long moment. See, Rhett was across the street. He did not approach. He watched. See, Strake turned and saw him. Across 30 feet of Main Street, the 2 men looked at each other. See, Strake said nothing. Neither did Rhett. There was nothing useful to say, and both of them understood this, and the understanding of it was its own kind of conclusion. See, a marshal came out of the land office, said something to his partner, and walked in the direction of the bank. See, the bank where the second set of records was. Strake watched the marshal walk. See, then he turned and walked back in the direction of his house. See, he was arrested 2 days later, at his house, formally and without incident, along with the land office manager and 2 county officials named in the ledger. See, the bank manager who had been managing the secondary records surrendered voluntarily that same afternoon. See, which the investigators said was not unusual. The first person to come to terms generally did so, because they were the first to understand that the alternative was worse. See, the arrests were not dramatic. Nothing about it had the quality of the confrontations in the street, the firelit standoff, the moment of the step back. See, it was paperwork and official language and men in handcuffs walking to horses, and the people of Red Hollow watched it happen from the boardwalks and from their windows and from the open doorways of their shops. See, old Virgil Tate watched from the bench in front of the barber shop. See, he drove his cane against the boardwalk, once, twice, 3 times, a slow percussion that might have been satisfaction or grief or both. See, because the end of a bad thing is not simply good, it is also the inventory of what the bad thing cost, and that inventory takes time. See, Rhett stood on the main street and watched and felt something that was not triumph. See, triumph was clean, and what he felt was not clean. It was more like the feeling of a debt partially paid, the part that could be paid in action, which was over, alongside the part that couldn't be, which was permanent. See, Wade was still in that cemetery north of Millhaven. See, Elias Calder was still gone. Maisie was still a girl who had grown up faster than any child should have to, in a freight shed, alone, in the specific silence of having no one to ask if what she was doing was right. See, none of the arrests changed that, and he had never thought they would. See, What they changed was the future, not the past, the future. See, that was worth something. He believed that clearly and without needing to dress it up. See, the day after the arrests, when the investigators were still in the land office and the territorial marshals were taking statements, and Red Hollow was processing what it meant to be a town, without Gideon Strake in the big house on the hill, see, Maisie came to find Rhett where he was sitting on the front step of the Hendrick house. See, she sat down beside him, not with space between them the way she had initially managed her proximity to him. The careful distance of a child who has learned to keep exits available. See, beside him, close enough that their shoulders were a few inches apart. See, she was quiet for a while. He let her be quiet. "What happens to the house?" she said finally. "See, your father's." "Yes, the property review will take time." See, but the transfer was fraudulent, which means the Calder homestead title reverts. See, it'll come back to you. He paused. "You'll need a guardian to manage it until you're of age. See, someone to make the legal decisions." She looked at the street. See, Clara said she would. She'd be a good choice. Another silence. See, then are you going to leave? He had been waiting for this question since the night she had asked where she would go after it was over. See, he had not prepared an answer because prepared answers had a habit of saying what you intended rather than what was true, and he was tired of the gap between those two things. See, "I was thinking about that," he said. "I have a horse somewhere in Strake's possession that legally belongs to me, and once the property review clears, I'll be able to claim him back." He looked at the street. "See, that'll take time. I'd need somewhere to be while it takes time." See, Maisie looked at him sideways. "The Calder barn is structurally sound," she said. "See, except for the back wall, which needs 2 new boards." "See, I noticed that. And the south field needs clearing before spring." "See, I noticed that too. You can't do all of that in the time it takes to recover a horse," she said. "See, no," he agreed. "Probably not." She looked at him for a moment with her dark, steady eyes. See, and in them he saw the full accounting, what she was asking, and what she was not asking, and what she had calculated about him in the days since he had come off a horse, before it stopped moving to stand beside her in a public street. See, he had not asked to be calculated. See, he had simply been himself in front of her, and she had done the math and arrived somewhere, and she was sitting beside him, close enough that their shoulders were almost touching, which was where she had decided to land. See, "I'm not easy to live with," he said. "I don't sleep well, and I'm not good at talking in the morning, and I have a tendency to fix things that aren't broken because I get anxious when I don't have something to work on." See, Papa was the same way, she said. He used to reorganize the barn at 2 in the morning. See, that's a family trait you might want to know about before you commit to it. See, "I've been sleeping in a freight shed for 11 weeks, Maisie said. See, "My standards for cohabitation are flexible," he almost smiled. See, he held it back on instinct and then let it go, because holding things back by instinct was a habit he was trying to examine more carefully. See, "All right," he said. "All right," she said. They sat on the step in the thin autumn light of a Colorado morning and watched Red Hollow go about the complicated business of becoming itself again, which was not a clean process and was not going to be. See, the land disputes would take months to resolve. Some families would come back and some wouldn't. See, the officials who had been arrested would have lawyers, and the lawyers would work slowly, and some version of justice would emerge from that process. And it would be imperfect and partial in the way that justice always is. See, because justice is what humans manage when they are trying to do the right thing with imperfect instruments, and the instruments are always imperfect. See, but the Morrison family came back the following week. See, they had heard in the next county that things had changed in Red Hollow, and they came back with their wagon and their 3 children, and stood in front of their property and talked to the investigator who was managing the review. See, and the investigator told them the title was under consideration and recommended they stay close. See, they stayed close. They camped on their own land while the paperwork worked through the system, which was not ideal but was also not the same as being driven off, and the difference mattered to them in a way that was visible. See, the Calder Homestead review cleared in 6 weeks. which was faster than Rhett had expected and which he suspected had something to do with the quality of Elias's documentation. When the ledger said a deed was fraudulent and specified the primary source that demonstrated the fraud, the investigator did not have to construct the argument from scratch. Elias had already built it. Even in the ledger, the man was doing the work. Clara Fenwick became Maisie's legal guardian in November, with the agreement that Rhett would be present at the Calder property in the capacity of ranch hand and eventual land manager, which was a formal description of something that had already been decided on a step in October. Bishop came home in December. The property review of Strake's holdings uncovered a black quarter horse registered to a man named Calloway among the livestock. And the territorial investigator's formal request for return of assets was a piece of paper Rhett held in his hands for a long time before he walked to the pen where Bishop was standing and opened the gate and went in and stood next to him. Bishop was fine. Better than fine, he had been stabled well because Strake had an eye for horses even when they weren't his. He turned his head and looked at Rhett with the expression of a horse who has been in worse situations and has a long memory. And he pressed his nose against Rhett's chest in the way he had done for 11 years when he decided that the current situation was acceptable. Rhett stood in the pen with his hand on Bishop's neck and was quiet for a while. He thought about the crossroads where they had been separated. He thought about walking 3 days to a town where he had no one and nothing, and sitting down in front of an empty storefront with the specific intention of just stopping, and letting whatever came next come. He had not known that what would come next would be half a biscuit and a pair of dark, serious eyes and an impossible assignment he had not been asked to want. He had wanted it anyway. That was the thing he kept arriving at when he examined the last several months with any honesty. He had not been drafted into it against his will. At every point where he could have reasonably stepped back, when he could have said he was nobody and had nothing, when he could have put Maisie's problem down and picked up the road north and not come back, he had made the other choice. Not because he was brave. He was not particularly brave. But because the thing in front of him had been real, and the thing he was walking toward before had been nothing, and even a broken man knows the difference between real and nothing when they're standing next to each other. He had needed Maisie as much as she had needed him. He suspected she knew this, because she knew most things, and she had never held it over him, which was its own kind of grace. Maisie came into the pen behind him and stood on the bottom rail of the fence to reach Bishop's nose, which Bishop accepted with the patience of the experienced. He's beautiful, she said. He's always known it, Rhett said. It's a character flaw. She looked at Bishop critically. He seems calm about it. Vanity in horses comes out as confidence. He's comfortable being looked at. She scratched Bishop's nose, and Bishop leaned into it slightly, which was high praise from a horse that calibrated his responses to exactly what he felt. Maisie appeared to understand this intuitively, the way she understood most things about animals, and people not from being taught, but from paying the kind of attention that most people don't bother to pay. Papa would have liked him, she said. I think so too. She was quiet for a moment. Then, do you think about him? Your brother? He had been waiting for this question too, though he had not known it. Every day, he said. I thought about him for 6 years and told myself I was angry at him. Now I think about him and know what I was actually doing. He paused. It doesn't make it better exactly, but it makes it honest, which is the best I can do. He was trying to fix what was broken, Maisie said. Same as Papa. Same as you. We're a family of people who can't leave broken things alone, he said. It's a hard way to be. It's a good way to be, she said. It just costs a lot. He looked at her, this girl who had paid more than her share of the cost. Who had paid it at 8 years old in an abandoned freight shed with mismatched braids and 2 large boots and the careful precision of someone who could not afford to be wrong. She was still small for her age, and she would probably always be small for her age, and none of that had anything to do with the size of what she contained. Yes, he said. It does. Spring came to the Calder homestead in a way that spring comes when someone has been working toward it all winter, not as a surprise, but as a result. See, the south field was cleared. The barn's back wall had 2 new boards that did not match the weathering of the others yet, but would. See, the house had been gone through room by room, and the things that had been moved by Strake's men were put back in the logic of the people who had originally arranged them. See, which required asking Maisie where things belonged, and Maisie knowing every single answer without hesitation, which she did, because she had lived in these rooms and paid attention to them the way she paid attention to everything. See, Clara came for dinner on Fridays. See, Pete Hendrick came by most weeks for reasons he explained as practical and which were clearly not entirely practical. And Maisie handled this with the dignity of someone who had decided to find it entertaining rather than annoying. See, Daniel Hendrick appeared occasionally with extra timber or a tool he thought might be useful, and he and Rhett would work for an hour in a companionable silence that was the best kind of friendship, the kind that does not require narration. See, old Virgil Tate came once in March, drove his cane against the porch post 3 times by way of greeting, sat for coffee, and said that the Morrison family had officially reoccupied their property, and the deed review had concluded, and Red Hollow had more families with clear title now than it had had in 4 years. See, he said it without celebration. The way an honest man reports a correction accurately, without pretending it erases the damage, but without diminishing it either. See, the Calloway and Calder names appeared in the same territorial record that documented the conclusion of the Strake investigation. See, Elias Calder and Wade Calloway were listed as the original sources of the evidence that had broken the case, with dates and descriptions that were accurate and complete. See, it was not a monument, it was a record. It would sit in an archive in Denver, and most people would never read it. See, Rhett thought that was fine. He thought the men themselves would have agreed it was fine. See, they had not been doing it for the record. They had been doing it because they had seen something wrong and they could not look at it without doing something about it, and the something they did had worked, just not in time to help them personally. See, it had helped Maisie. It had helped the Morrison family and the 7 Thetsleys who had recovered their land, and the dozen who were still in review, and the ones who would benefit from the precedent the case had set in the territorial court. See, it had helped Red Hollow become a town that breathed at regular volume again. See, that was not nothing. That was the opposite of nothing. See, Wade would have known that. Elias would have known it. See, Rhett was still learning how to know it, the way he was still learning how to sleep through a full night and how to accept that the exhaustion in him was allowed to set down some of what it had been carrying. See, he was a slow learner on that last point. He had always been a slow learner on anything that required him to be still. See, but he had time. That was the thing he had not had on the morning. He sat down in front of an empty storefront and closed his eyes. He had not had time, or a reason to want it. See, and now he had a south field to get into shape before planting season, and a horse to exercise, and a girl who came home from school on Fridays and told him 3 things about her day whether he asked or not. See, which he had never asked her to do, and which he had come to organize his Fridays around, in a way he did not examine too closely, because he did not want to examine it into a smaller thing than it was. See, the last Friday in April, Maisie came home from school and told him 2 things about her day and then stopped. See, he waited. Miss Fenwick taught us about land surveying today, she said. See, he looked at her. She said the most important thing a surveyor does is go back over their work, Maisie said. See, she said the first pass finds the features. The second pass finds the errors. See, and the third pass finds what the features and the errors together mean. See, she was looking at the south field, which was ready now, the ground turned and waiting. See, she said Papa would have said that's true of most things. See, not just surveying. Rhett stood beside her and looked at the field. See, he thought about 3 passes. The first pass of his life had found the features, the things he was good at, the horsework, the territory, the years of being someone worth knowing in a county or 2. See, The second pass had found the errors, and he had spent 2 years in the errors, and had nearly stopped that in front of an empty storefront. See, the third pass was this, standing next to a girl in a recovered field with his horse in the barn, and the work of 2 dead men finally finished, and the future open in front of him in the specific way of a thing that has been cleared. See, what the features and the errors together mean. He thought they meant something like this, that the cost of being a person who cannot leave broken things alone is real, and it is high, and it will take things from you that you will not get back. See, and the thing that makes it worth paying is not the outcome, because the outcome is never guaranteed. See, it is the fact of having paid it, of having looked at the broken thing and decided that looking away was worse than whatever the fixing would cost. See, Wade had known this. Elias had known it. Maisie had lived it at 8 years old in a freight shed with mismatched braids, holding half a biscuit out to a stranger who had nothing left. See, Rhett was 34 years old and had spent years confusing emptiness with freedom, and Hotchild had walked up to him in his worst moment and handed him a reason. See, and he had been stubborn enough, or lucky enough, or just broken in exactly the right places to take it. See, he was not fixed. He was not the man he had been before the losing years, or whoever he would have been if they had not happened. See, he was the version that had come through them, which was rougher and slower to trust and still bad at mornings. See, and he was standing in a field in Colorado in the last days of April, with a child beside him who had her father's precision and her mother's absence, and 11 weeks of solitary survival behind her and the rest of her life in front of her. See, your father was right, Rhett said, about most things. See, not about knowing when to run, Maisie said no. See, not about that. She considered the field for another moment. See, then she said, I'm glad he didn't run, though, because if he'd run, he wouldn't have built what he built. See, and if he hadn't built it, none of this would have ended the way it ended. See, Rhett thought about this. That's a hard way to be glad about something, he said. See, yes, she said, it is. She walked down off the porch and into the field and started walking the rows, the way she had seen her father walk them, measuring with her steps, counting something. See, her 2 large boots had been replaced in February with boots that fit, and she moved without the small shuffling compensation that fit-finding requires. See, she moved like herself, directly, with the precise unhurried attention she gave to everything she decided was worth her time. See, Rhett watched her from the porch. See, somewhere north of Millhaven, in a county cemetery along the east wall, 2 markers sat in the spring ground, one named, one not, both belonging to men who had decided that the broken thing in front of them was worth the cost of pressing against it. See, they would not see the field that had been cleared because of what they built. See, they would not see the girl walking it, but the girl was walking it. See, and that was the thing about the work of honest people. It does not always arrive in time to help them. See, sometimes it arrives in time to help someone else. See, sometimes that someone is a child with mismatched braids who hands a stranger half a biscuit on a boardwalk and says, "Come with me." And the stranger, for reasons he will spend the rest of his life being grateful he could not fully articulate, follows. See, Maisie reached the far end of the field and turned back and looked at Rhett across the distance. See, the east row needs one more pass, she called. I know, he said. See, are you going to stand on the porch, or are you going to do it? He stepped off the porch and went to do it.